some issues with adjusting the boardroom technology to accommodate meetings with all trustees present. We have decided that instead of funneling resources from the classrooms and central administration to expedite this changing technology process for 13 people who are still able to meet and complete their work, it is more important to have the whole system focused on student and staff safety and the learning environments. Until resources are available, we are following a practice that will allow a few trustees to return to the boardroom each meeting. If you do have any questions about the content of our meeting, please reach out to your local trustee or to myself after the meeting. During this meeting, trustees have the ability to vote digitally and can add themselves to a speakers list to try to preserve sound clarity. Everyone is encouraged to keep their microphone muted, even when waiting for an answer to a question. As per all our board meetings, this meeting is recorded and will be posted on the hdsb.ca website. As these virtual meetings are long and focused, I will be calling probably at least one 5-minute recess during the course of this meeting. At this time, I will take roll call. Please answer as I call your name in alphabetical order by last name. Trustee Amos.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Daniele.
Thank you, I am here.
Vice Chair Harrison.
Hello, I'm here.
Trustee Garretts.
Very happy to be here.
Trustee Gray.
Here, thank you.
Trustee Oliver.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Reynolds.
Happy September.
Trustee Rocha.
Good evening.
Trustee Shuttleworth.
Hi, everyone.
Trustee Taylor.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
And Trustee Widyalankara.
Hi, everyone.
Trustee Collard sends her regrets and has provided an explanation to colleagues and the Secretary of the Board. As per our bylaws, trustees must vote to accept the absence of Trustee Collard. Trustee Oliver, will you accept this motion? Or will you move this motion?
I move the motion.
Excellent. Trustee Amos, will you second this motion?
I'd like to second the motion. Thank you.
Okay. The motion is that the Halton District School Board accepts the absence of Trustee Collard for the September 2nd, 2020 board meeting. Please vote using your blue form. We're finding the internet a bit slow this evening. I have, there we go. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. Director Miller, could you please note the senior staff that are here and any other staff that are joining us in this meeting?
Thank you, Chair Durban. All superintendents are here, and also our Human Rights and Equity Advisor, Dr. Jula Moa, and General Manager Sari Taha. We have a special guest, but we're going to introduce him. Well, I'd like to actually do that right now, if that's okay. I'm going forward.
Go right ahead, Director Miller.
I will ask Superintendent Puccetti to introduce the newest HDSB General Manager.
Thank you, Director Miller. Through the chair, I'm very happy to introduce you to Fred Thibault, who is joining us as the General Manager of Planning. Fred has a lot of experience in Halton. We stole him from the Halton Catholic School Board, and what's great about that is we'll be able to continue our wonderful relationship with Halton Catholic. And Fred's promised not to give us any of their secrets. But in the meantime, I would like to just ask Fred to just give you a little brief overview of his experience. So Fred, I'll turn it over to you. You just need to turn your camera on and your mic on.
Evening, everyone. Nice to meet everyone in the virtual world right now.
hopefully it's in person sooner rather than later. But with that, I'll keep it brief because I know these meetings can get long. As Maya pointed out, I do have quite a bit of experience in the Halton region, and I do have quite a bit of experience in school board planning for a while now. So my roots started at the French Public Board back almost 10 years ago now, if not longer. First starting off as a draftsman, going into schools, measuring things, then being the planner, and then eventually working for the Halton Catholic Board and working with in the Halton of region, the region of Halton, which I know is a very fast growing and challenging area, but these are good problems to have. We're a growth board, new schools, new projects, a lot of renewal down the road. So I'm very excited to be working for this board and continuing the good work in getting this region up to par with meeting all its school accommodation needs. So looking forward again to working with you all, knowing your respective areas that you cover, knowing your schools, and hearing about them and how we can do better at the board. So thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Welcome, General Manager Thibault. This evening, Trustee Garretts will be honoring the land. Go ahead, Trustee Garretts.
Thank you. Good evening. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of our many First Nations and Métis, from the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron to the Haudenosaunee and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Thank you very much, Trustee Garretts. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Seeing none. Next, we're up to the agenda. Trustee Rocha, would you like to move a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And Trustee Shuttleworth, would you like to second that motion?
I sure can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion at all about the agenda this evening? I'm looking to the speakers list. Seeing none. So if you could please go to your voting form to accept the agenda for this evening. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so next we are up to our presentations. And Director Miller, we have two new student trustees, and I was wondering if you would conduct the formal part, the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Chair Durban. We do indeed have two new student trustees, and this is the strangest oath of office we've ever done at the Halton District School Board. Normally I would read out and they would repeat, but we have changed it around a little bit. So I will turn it over to, first of all, Trustee Taylor to read out the oath of office and for all the public and for all trustees, and then Vandy will do it after. So Trustee Taylor. You're muted, Trustee Taylor.
I apologize. I, Evan Taylor, do solemnly declare that, in accordance with the Education Act, related legislation, and board policies and procedures, I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of student trustee. In my role as student trustee, I will comply with freedom of information and protection of personal privacy and conflict of interest legislation. recognizing the importance of maintaining the confidentiality of the board with regard to matters that are dealt with in closed session, and declare not to divulge any information of the contents of any material shared with trustees in closed meetings, and that I am not disqualified under any requirement from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board.
Thank you, Trustee Taylor. Normally at this time in previous years, we would have Trustee Taylor sign it, and he would get a copy, and the rest of us and a copy would stay with the board. But congratulations, Trustee Taylor. I know you've already signed it now. So
Thank you.
And our next student trustee.
I, Vandy Widya-Lankara, do solemnly declare that, one, in accordance with the Education Act, related legislation, and board policies and procedures, I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of student trustee. In my role as student trustee, I will comply with freedom of information and protection of personal privacy and conflict of interest legislation, recognizing the importance of maintaining the confidentiality of the board with regard to matters that are dealt with in closed session, and declare not to divulge any information of the contents of any material shared with trustees in closed meetings, and that I am not disqualified under any requirement from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board.
Thank you, Trustee Widya-Lankara. I will, on behalf of senior staff, I welcome you, and I know this is the oath, and they've been signed. They will be signed and sent to the office for us in safekeeping, and you will keep it as well. It is unfortunate because often parents of the student trustees show up, parents and families, and that's unable to happen, but hopefully they've tuned in to watch this. For trustees' benefit, we talked about this before, and I know many trustees on this call, Trustee Oliver, Daniele, Amos, they were all there to hear the speeches for student trustees in the spring. And both Trustee Taylor and Widya-Lankara gave remarkable speeches. And I think they will represent student voice very well for us, a voice that we probably more than ever, given the circumstances we're in, need to hear all the time. So with that, I will turn it back to Chair Grabentz. Congratulations.
Congratulations. I know everybody can't see the little Brady Bunch screen I've got in front of me, but there's all sorts of clapping going on from all the trustees that have their cameras on. It's great to see, and welcome. It's always wonderful to bring in a new set of student trustees, a new fresh look at the board. It's wonderful to have you here. And from this point forward, you are welcome to vote on any motion. Okay, so we are now up to the consent agenda items. Trustee Shuttleworth, would you like to move a motion to deal with the consent agenda?
Yes, I will.
Excellent. Trustee Garretts, would you like to second?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for September 2nd, 2020. Are there any items that need to be pulled? Trustee Rocha, you have your hand up.
Through the chair, I have a question regarding one of the motions on the order paper.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, so on page 1 of the order paper motion M180174, the third one from the bottom, it is noted that it's been delayed, and it has to do with the boundary review for Samuel Curtis Estates. Can you elaborate as to why it's been delayed?
Yes, through you, Chair Grabentz, to Trustee Rocha, I believe that this boundary review was completed, and it was completed last year, and students were redirected back from Burlington back towards Blakelock in the high school area. So I will go to, and I forgot to introduce manager of the director's office, Gail Gortmaker, is also on the line with us. We will sort through this, but this has been completed.
Okay. So then are there any other items that need to be pulled? Okay, seeing no other speakers on the speakers list, I'd ask you to go to your voting form, please. So I'll be looking for 12 votes. Just missing one more. There we go, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now we are up to ratification action items. Vice Chair Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, we do have one item. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the resolution from the Halton District School Board meeting in private session, September 2nd, 2020, respecting property matters, report 20084, and I so move.
Thank you. And Trustee Reynolds, would you like to second this motion?
Yes, I second the motion.
Is there any discussion at all? Seeing none. All those in favor, please use your voting form. No, okay. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So we are going to move along here to 4.2 action items for September 2nd. We don't have any action items for this evening. So we are up to communications to the board. First off is item number 5.1, student trustee reports. I know this is a lot to ask, but Trustee Taylor and Trustee Woodya-Lankara, do you have a student trustee report at this time? The floor is yours. You can actually say whatever you like.
Yeah, we do actually. I think Trustee Taylor can begin.
Trustee Taylor, you might be on mute. Oh, there you go.
Through the Chair Gerbens to the rest of the board, we appreciate the warm welcome and guidance from all of the trustees and the entire board, and especially our trustee mentors, Trustee Daniele and Trustee Oliver, as well as Director Miller, Associate Director Bogue, and Chair Gerbens. We recognize it's been a really unusual start to the year, and it's certainly been quite an interesting start to our term. Trustee Woodya-Lankara and I have been answering many student questions and trying to resolve many concerns. I would now like to pass the rest of our report on to Trustee Woodya-Lankara.
So there's been, thank you, Evan, or Trustee Taylor. There's been quite a bit of interest expressed about Student Senate and what that'll look like in the coming year, which makes us really excited. We completely understand that that isn't the priority at the moment, but once the school year is up and running and hopefully running smoothly, we're looking forward to be able to slowly start Senate once again, and perhaps this will be at a virtual capacity. But until then, we'll continue to keep the student body as informed as possible and provide as much clarity and try our best to address as many concerns as possible. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And looking forward to many, many student trustee reports in the future. Okay, so we are now up to action items for September 16th. We have none listed at this time, but I just want to let people know that sometimes we have items with established criteria that need to come to the board table more than one time. The first time is for information, and the second is for consideration for approval. And as I said, we don't have any at this time. We do have one important information item for this evening, though. We are up to 531, reopening schools, Director Miller and the senior administrative team. And this is a verbal update covering things like an overview, staggered entry, and financials. So Director Miller, I'm just going to pass that over to you now.
Thank you, Chair Durban. And I'm going to start off with some updates for families around the staggered entry. And once I've made my comments, I will go to each of the superintendents, but I'm looking to the trustees. If there are questions around the update around the staggered entry, feel free to ask them at this time as opposed to waiting until we've completed everything. We'll also give an update on the financials and what that all means and so on. But if trustees will recall, on the town hall that the HDSB had last Wednesday, I've lost track of the dates, but whatever date that was last Wednesday, we announced that students from grades 1 to 12 would be masked. Our previous position was students from grades 4 to 12 would be masked. Superintendent Ruddock can speak to that later on this evening. But we also talked about a delayed entry of schools with school commencing September 14th, with our hope that we would be able to bring students in for, invite students in for an introduction to the protocols and what the building looks like while they're in there and so on. So I've got an update on that for trustees this evening and for the public. And I do want to say this, and I'll say it again at the end, a communication will be going out to all families related to this update right now, tomorrow or tomorrow morning. Well, tomorrow, and then of course we'll have questions. But I do want to say it's not without controversy, and because we've had to make difficult decisions because not everything is falling into place the way we would want it to, and it's given the complexity of organizing schools, organizing the busing. And we've all had to do this in a very, very short period of time with changing information. We've also had to create completely virtual schools, 3 elementary schools and 1 secondary school, where we've started from scratch. And there isn't much difference from that and a bricks and mortar school when you start, other than the building. So these complexities have made it difficult for us to navigate through. Plus, as trustees are well aware, there has been new information and changing of direction, maybe not changing direction, but a tangential change in some of the advice given by both public health and the Ministry of Education. And of course, the federal government weighed in by providing funds directly to provinces, who then gave boards particular funds. All this has added to a pretty complicated situation. In addition to that, we have the anxiety and the nervousness of our communities, our parents and their kids, or their children. And we know that this makes it very, very difficult for many of our parents to make decisions on returning their children to face-to-face learning or to a virtual environment. The same exists for our staff. We have staff that have immunocompromised health issues, and we care very deeply about our staff, obviously, as do the trustees, and we are doing our best to accommodate all of those at the same time. So with that, I would just like to say school will commence on September 14th. Elementary students will be invited by alphabet, by their last name, to attend school on September 10th and 11th. Group 1 would be surnames from A to L, and they will attend school on Thursday, September 10th. And surname M to Z, Group 2, will attend on September 11th. So these students will be in their regular cohort, but they'll be half. So there's no mixing of the cohort. Group 1, when those students arrive, it'll be the students that are in that cohort. They arrive and they'll work with their teachers to go through protocols, what the building looks like, and to expose the students to the new reality of the building they are in now. No curriculum will be delivered on those 2 days, on the Thursday and Friday. And it's important to know that, because this is an optional return. We are unable, because of the nature of the integration of our busing network with the Halton Catholic District School Board and getting it all organized, to provide busing on those days. So I appreciate that some families, some students may not be able to get into the schools on September 10th or 11th. Because of that, we have produced a virtual look, and it's going out. It's already gone out, and many families have already viewed it. Later on, Superintendent Etoff will talk about that, so they can see what health and safety looks like in the schools. But for students that are unable to make it on the 10th or 11th, either A, because they require busing and it's not available, or B, there's some other reason they're not able to do it, our teachers will go over all the same things again when they arrive the following week, the week of September 4th. So no student will be left without the training or the understanding or the introduction of what school looks like now. We appreciate that the lack of busing poses a challenge for families, but quite frankly, we really have no choice. And so the choice came down to, we don't have any students in, or don't provide optional opportunities for them to come in, or we do our best to get as many in as we can who are able to get there, and provide other opportunities for those who cannot get there. We also appreciate this may clog our parking lots of our schools. So I would ask for all parents to please be wary of that, be careful of that there may be more cars than usual in the parking lots because we have not provided busing. So that, for those elementary students, that includes all those in the regular program, all those that are in French immersion, and all those that are in the self-contained gifted program. They will come, as I said, A to L on March 10th, A to L on March 10th, and M to Z on September 11th. And as I said, the purpose is to help students understand health protocols and familiarize themselves with the buildings and the new reality of attending school. September 14th, busing will be available. Busing will be available, and students will arrive. And outside of doing some additional training or additional conversations, the curriculum will start. The school year will start, and students will start into their lessons. For those students that are in self-contained, excluding gifted, part of this is secondary as well, but those that are in self-contained, that excludes gifted because those students are there, we will be providing bus for them to come on September 11th. The Friday. So all those students will be able to get bused to the school only on that Friday. And then, of course, from September 14th, every day after that. So, and I think that's about it for elementary right now. As I said, a communication will go out. With secondary, with the secondary panel, it's a little more challenging around timetabling. It's a little more challenging because the nature of secondary schools, they're first of all larger. Students take over grade 9s and 10s, take 8 courses over the year. Getting all those courses aligned with the specialist teachers that they require and setting up the virtual school makes it much more challenging to get those students in for September 10th and 11th. Consequently, we will be still organizing our secondary schools on the 10th and 11th, and secondary school students will not be coming into school for an introduction to the health protocols and so on. So as many parents know, there's 2 cohorts. There's Cohort A and Cohort B at secondary. Cohort A will spend September 14th, because those are the students that arrive, and that's approximately 15 students per class. They will arrive September 15th and go over those protocols and all the procedures that they will have to follow from that have been recommended by public health on September 14th. In addition, their curriculum work may start that day. Those Cohort A students will be in on the Monday, September 14th, the Tuesday, September 15th, and the Wednesday, September 16th. On September 17th, the Cohort B students will be in, and they will get that introduction to the protocols and how it works. But in addition, we are asking all parents and particularly secondary students who are young men and women, 14 to 18 years old, to go on to the site to take a look at how we are doing the protocols so they can acquaint themselves. They're obviously more independent and better equipped to deal with this on their own in terms of learning a lot of stuff, so they can come into school when they're ready to come into school to ask questions and clarification. Even though the secondary school students are not coming on the 10th and 11th, our grade 9 link crews will be doing activities with our grade 9 students on the 10th and 11th. And that will be led by teachers who are in the link crew and link leaders, which is frequently students in senior grades. And they will do a number of activities with grade 9 students, all in a virtual environment. It won't be in real time. And on Friday, September 11th, we are asking all our principals and all our teachers to reach out to their students, either individually or collectively, to welcome them and to just touch base with them. Our schools will be organized well enough to be able to do that by that Friday, so that they can reach out to all their students and or their parents to know where they're going. So, and again, as I said with the elementary, those students that are in the self-contained, in the secondary panel, it's called the Community Pathways Program. Those students will be invited to come on Friday, September 11th, to see the areas in which they are will be going to school, and we will be providing busing for those students as well. I would also add that many of our schools are reaching out to those students who are in self-contained and or the Community Pathways Program and inviting them in next week, starting September 8th and 9th, to see the places where these students will go to school. That's an individual principal's decision in terms of how it's working, and it's depending on the how ready they are for those students to do it. So
Director Miller, we have a couple questions.
let me just finish the point on virtual schools, because that's the last one and it's the shortest one. On our virtual schools, we will be beginning September 14th. They will be starting school like the rest of the students on September 14th. But there is also a training for them with Brightspace that Superintendent Hunt Gibbons can talk to a little bit more detail than I. But we're encouraging students to go on to take a look at that, so they understand the learning environment that they will be in when they go to the virtual high school. So with that, I will turn it back to Chair Durban for questions, and then we'll go through after these questions. Thanks.
Okay, so I jumped on the speakers list just because I have a question about the elementary, September 10th and 11th. And is that a whole day or a couple hours, or what is the length of time those elementary students will be in on the 10th and 11th for their health protocol orientation?
Through you, Chair Durban, it was you that asked the question. Through you, Chair Durban, to you, Chair Durban, it's a full day. It's a regular school day.
Okay, and then we have Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Director Miller. My question is concerning the Cohort B students in high school. So they are expected to start on Monday, September 14th.
Cohort B?
Yes, online.
They will start their online September 14th.
So-
They will not start the face-to-face until September 17th.
So will there be, because they're kind of starting with they're going to wake up on Monday morning and have no training like, so if you've been at school and you go home, you've been instructed by the teacher how to use your computer. Whereas if you haven't been to the school yet, you might not necessarily know where you're looking. So is there some kind of training for those Cohort B students who are not in school before they start their online programming on Monday, September the 14th?
Through your chair, Durban, to Trustee Shuttleworth, I will start this and then turn it over to Superintendent Hunt Gibbons. The short answer to that question is yes. There's a virtual training through Brightspace that we will be doing, but I'll turn it over to Superintendent Hunt Gibbons to elaborate.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth. The short answer to your question is yes. So regardless of whether their students are learning in the adaptive blended model in their home school or in the virtual school, Brightspace is new to many students this year. So unless they've taken night school, summer school, or one of our e-learning courses, Brightspace is new for everyone. So we have created student supports, and our teachers will be ensuring and reminding our students that these supports are there. We have created an updated website on HDSB. If anyone just Googles Brightspace, they will find supports there. We have created videos for students who will learn better that way. And we have also translated these videos into 10 different languages so that families can also understand and learn about how we are supporting students. And so this information will be going home to all of our students. And again, our teachers will be reminding as part of the orientation when they're reaching out at the end of next week to say, welcome, you're in my class. And I may not be meeting you for a couple days. However, this is our activity and our welcoming. And we've also created a whole host and resources for teachers to support community building and relationship building in classes, regardless of whether that is virtual, the way we're doing right now, or if they happen to be in person, face-to-face. And so relationship building is a priority in our secondary schools, just as it is in our elementary schools, regardless of your instructional model.
Can I follow up? So
Yes.
I guess this is through you, Chair, now to Superintendent Hunt Gibbons. So with that, then you're saying that you are putting these supports in pockets and the teachers are going to reach out. So are the teachers going to reach out through their email? So how is this contact going to be made prior to September 14th, or is the onus on the student to ensure that connection is made?
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth. So School Messenger will send messages home from the school office, from the principal, welcoming everyone to the new school year, reminding people how they connect and how they enter their classrooms through Brightspace. And teachers will then be using their Brightspace to connect with students, and that might include a welcoming video, message posted to a wall, or a variety of other things. But the schools will be taking care of in general messaging to ensure that all students know what to do on that first day and through that first week as we all are new to a new learning system.
And I would add that we are asking all teachers to reach out to all students, their students, all of their students.
By email? By phone? Are there going to be, is there going to be an assurance that so if they don't, like if you send an email, sometimes you don't know if it's been read or it's just sitting there. So is there any way that we're going to ensure that that communication, the gap has been closed so that we know that the students have gotten the message? Like, I'm just worried about those students who don't necessarily have access to the computer and are looking at their emails all the time.
Through you, Chair Durban, to Trustee Shuttleworth, this is actually no different than in a regular school year. I think we've got over 1,000 secondary teachers. I think it'd be difficult to ensure that it happens, but I'm confident in the professionalism and our past experience is any indication of future actions, I am not least bit worried. I think our teachers will reach out to these kids. In fact, I know they will, and they'll find a way that they feel more comfortable with. And there will be some that it slips up on, I think, but I think for the most part it will work.
Yeah, my concern just is there is no in-person close the gap when the kid's in the school until Thursday of that week. So those first 3 days, if there hasn't been that assurance of connection, they're behind 3 days. That's just a concern.
Through you, Chair Durbens, to Trustee Shuttleworth, I understand. I don't share that concern because I don't think that will happen. I think our teachers and our principals will make sure that they are in touch with their students. But if it does happen, we will need to address it. Like I said, our past experience when we haven't been through something like this before, but our past experience in staff reaching out to students is generally very, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, through you, Chair. My questions were answered by Superintendent Hunt Gibbons, but I do want to build on the question asked by Trustee Shuttleworth about the communications from the teachers to the students. And I'm wondering if those emails could also include the parent on that first initial introductory communication, and if maybe the function of read receipt could be added to the email so that the teacher has an assurance that that email was received and read. Thank you.
Through you, Chair Durbens, to Trustee Oliver. That's a very tricky one around ensuring that the parents are also on it. Because one of the things that we try to foster in secondary schools is independence and autonomy of the students. And many of our students would not like their parents on an email that comes from the teacher and so on. So I understand why you're asking the question. It makes a lot of sense. But I guess what I would encourage is, in the past, there have been, when you think that we have 1,000 or so, more than 1,000 secondary school teachers, and we have roughly 19,000 students at secondary school, when communication occurs during a regular school year, and there are so many times that there's an expectation that a communication occurs at a secondary school. If a student has found themselves in difficulty, either academically or behaviorally or whatever else, and many teachers make sunshine calls, as they're called, where they phone a family or email a student to say, hey, great job, or whatever else. We have very, very, very few concerns brought to us that teachers have not communicated with the students. So I think in this case, we have to trust the professionalism and the integrity of our secondary school teachers, that they will do the right thing. And I do believe that they will do the right thing and contact their students and make sure. But I do want to remind trustees that they will see them on September 17th. It'll just be in a virtual environment. So I take what you're saying, Trustee Oliver, and we'll take that back for consideration. I'm just giving you my thoughts off the top of my head.
Yeah, thank you. And if I could just build on that, I totally understand your rationale. It makes total sense to me. But this is a different year. And unlike other years where there is a parent-teacher interview, which might be the first opportunity that a parent even hears the name of the teacher and gets to meet the teacher, this kind of an early introductory email being sent from the teacher to the student, if the parent is included, the parent knows the name of the teacher at least, and then they can, follow up or, communicate as needed. So anyway, that was just the rationale that I had. Thank you.
Okay, we have no more questions at this time, so you can move forward with your report.
Thank you, Chair Durban. So I will first turn it over to Superintendent Ruddock for updates on PPE, mask update, and conversations with public health.
Thank you. Through the chair to trustees. So we are very happy to say that we have received the vast majority of our PPE and cleaning supplies from the ministry. They have arrived in 2 shipments over the last few days, and we have a team of folks that are sorting through it all, preparing school allocations, and making sure that things get delivered out to all of our schools. And in fact, we have school buses making those deliveries today and tomorrow. So happy to say that all the PPE that we need will be on hand in time for the first day of school. I do want to take this moment to give a huge thank you and shout out to Dave Bennett and Judy Goldsworthy and their teams who have really worked through this monumental task of sorting through all of the PPE that has arrived. With regards to masks, we did consult with public health again last Wednesday, and we talked through some of the challenges and some of the benefits of our younger students wearing masks. And certainly there are still some challenges that need to be considered in the implementation in schools, such as a young person's ability to tolerate a mask for a great period of time, or the level of independence our youngest students will have wearing a mask. It was identified that it is an additional preventative measure, and ultimately we want to do all that we can to protect the health of students. And so for that reason, we have confirmed our decision to move forward with mandatory masks for grades 1 through 12. Kindergarten students are encouraged, but it does remain optional for kindergarten students to wear a mask. Certainly in school, the emphasis will be on education and teaching our students to wear a mask safely, as well as to grow the ability or build the skill in terms of wearing a mask for longer periods of time. Schools are currently working on a Prevent the Spread education plan, and we're also looking forward to some resources from Halton Public Health to support in this teaching plan. So we know that our staff will seek opportunities to take kids outside even more so that kids can get a mask break, whether it's taking the learning outside, taking a body break, or being outside for one of the nutrition breaks. So those will be built into the day. We've also expanded our exemption process. So we now have a form that covers an exemption request for grades 1 through 12. And within that exemption request, if the condition is known and reasonable that it would be difficult for a child to tolerate a mask, the principal may approve that. If the condition is unknown, the principal may request for some medical documentation to support the request. And certainly a child who, based on their profile, isn't able to tolerate a mask will be granted an exemption by the principal. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, and then I'll speak about the outbreak protocol.
Hey, Trustee Oliver, are your questions having to do with this?
Yes, thank you through your chair to Superintendent Ruddock. So I did hear you mention that breaks will be built into the course of the day for students to be able to take their masks off. Is there any consideration being given to having a designated space in the classroom where a student who, let's say, gets frustrated with wearing the mask or for whatever reason needs to take it off, can go to that safe space and have a couple of minutes without their mask and then return back to the rest of the class? Or are there any also more frequent breaks built into the in-class environment? Thank you.
Through the chair to Trustee Oliver. Certainly the schedule for breaks will be something that is decided by the school and by the classroom teacher in terms of what works on that given day, in terms of what the learning looks like and whether it's appropriate to take that learning outside. and then working on a staggered break process throughout the school so that the school ensures that there aren't too many students traveling through the halls at any given time. So it will look different from school to school and from class to class, and certainly age appropriate as well. Finding a safe space in the classroom, I would say that when we look at building a layout for classroom furniture that maximizes the physical distancing in our class, for our students in the classroom, that it would probably be difficult to also designate a space that would be a mask-free zone. Certainly in some of our larger classrooms, that's a possibility, but unlikely that we could implement a strategy like that in all of our classrooms across the system. So that's something that each classroom teacher would really need to look at and see if that's something that could work in their given space.
Okay, next question is Trustee Shuttleworth.
Okay, I'm going to try it this way rather than the other one. So my question is through you, Chair, to Superintendent Ruddock. With the masks for the students, are they bringing us masks from home, or are we providing the masks for the kids?
Through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth, it is an expectation that our families provide masks for students to wear at school. Schools will certainly have a collection of masks. Those did arrive from the ministry, and so we do have a collection of masks to provide to families if they're unable to source a mask on their own or if a mask is forgotten. And we also have a collection of disposable masks. So once we've given out all of our cloth masks, later in the school year, if someone forgets a mask on a given day or it gets soiled while they're at school and they don't have another, the school will have some disposable on hand as well. But it is an expectation, to the extent possible, families make sure that they find a mask that is the right fit for their child, both in terms of comfort and size. And so it's likely best that that's done individually by each family.
Okay, and Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I have two mask-related questions. Question number one is related to the routine of removing and putting masks back on. So when the students or anybody removes the mask, where I'm imagining that a routine will be really helpful in this situation. So are they being asked to bring a plastic bag to put it in, or what does that look like? And then the second question is just with respect to the quality of the PPE that's being received. I understand that these are produced en masse at this point in time and shipped centrally to all of the school boards across Ontario. And I think mine and everybody else's interest is just that they are of the quality that will provide maximum protection.
Through the chair to Vice Chair L. Harrison. So your first question around what kids are going to do with their mask when they're not wearing it, when they're outside taking a mask break. That was on the list of things that school-based action teams were going to problem solve. And I have no doubt that our teachers and our administrators are far more creative than I am in terms of problem solving what that looks like at the school level. And so schools will be developing a strategy to support students. And we know that in the messaging from public health in the video of Dr. Magani, that she also speaks to that and suggests some strategies for parents to also be thinking about. So certainly it's something that parents can be thinking in preparation of the first day of school. And then our schools are also thinking about strategies while the kids are there as well. With regards to the quality of the PPE that we have received, as I said, our team of staff have been going through the shipment in the last few days and have not raised any concerns around the quality of PPE that we've received. We have been assured by the ministry that we have been sent level 1 medical masks, which provides our staff an excellent level of protection while they're working with students.
Okay, next is Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. My question through the chair to likely Superintendent Reddick or the director. Further to the prevent the spread communication piece that will be shared through families and students, can you highlight how that all of us, of course, need to be a part of this solution, and that preventing the spread is a community-wide effort? Can you review or share with us what families part they have to play in this? And I'm speaking specifically about their roles of sending kids out to school each day, but also about how families might impact their current existing circle of 10. Are there recommendations that public health has made, or is there a messaging that we can share with families so that they can understand the importance that they have to play in this return to school by maybe tightening up their social circles? And I'm just wondering, what is our message on that? Because I think this is an important part that every one of us has to participate in.
Thank you for that question through the chair to Trustee Reynolds. Absolutely, our parents and families are partners in making sure that our schools remain healthy and safe. And so to the first part of your question, I would say the single most important piece that we ask our parents to commit to is completing the daily self-assessment every morning, making sure that their child doesn't demonstrate any one of the symptoms that are listed on the common symptoms for COVID-19, as well as making sure that they're familiar with the uncommon symptoms. All of our families will receive a poster that we ask that they place in a prominent place somewhere in their home to serve as a reminder each morning to complete that daily self-assessment. And while I completely appreciate the inconvenience of keeping a child home, even with only one symptom, this is truly the single most important preventative measure that that families can commit to, staying home when your child is ill. In reference to the circle, and we know that we've all enjoyed the expansion of the circle and the bubble over the course of the summer, but not so much our own local public health, but certainly I've heard messaging from Public Health Ontario that that this is the time that families should be looking at tightening that circle as students go back to school and their new circle becomes their classmates. And we want to make sure that that class remains safe and protected in the classroom environment, that families really should be thinking about reducing the number of close contacts outside of school and home. I think I answered all of your questions, but did I miss one?
No, thank you. Just as a follow-up, please. I really believe that thank you for going over all of the, I could say, responsibilities that we all have to play, because I'm hearing so many concerns about what is happening in schools. I want to make sure that everybody understands it's everybody's responsibility, even before coming to school. But the tightening up of the social circle, I think, needs to be reminded, because it's not, go to school and we'll tighten it up. It's you have a part to play when you walk out of school, and I think that families, since we've sort of gone into a level 3, people have loosened their welcomed grandparents and connected with friends and looked at their circles. But I think we have to remind families that this is the time to go and be vigilant again. And I believe it's really important to remind people. I certainly will when I get calls about what our schools are doing, I try and refer people back to, other things that they have to look at. But I was hoping that the messaging comes out very clear from our schools about parent-family responsibilities on this one.
Through your chaired events, through your chaired events to Trustee Reynolds, I'd like to make a point on that. I think you make an excellent point, and it's something, we've seen posters all over the place saying we're all in this together, and we are all in this together. And the solution is we all have to behave and act together, not physically together, but by the same actions. And I think your message is well received by us, and we will remind principals that perhaps they should be including this messaging in messaging home to parents, because this is just a kind of editorial remark on mine. There's such a feel around this whole pandemic that it's just all temporary while we all sit and wait for a vaccine to be developed. I think realistically a vaccine is sometime off, but the manufacturing of the vaccine and the distribution is even further off. So we as a society and we as a school board have to learn to live with this virus. And we have to learn to live in a way that's safe for our children, for each other, for our staffs. And so we have to do those things that you're referring to, because it's about living with the virus. We can't just, if we don't, we'll be shut down again. And that's no good for anybody. It's no good for the economy. It's no good for students. It's particularly not good for students and staff or any of us to be then re-isolated and re-shut down. So if we don't learn how to live with this virus, we will have bigger problems. So your point is very well taken, and it's something that all of us have to take seriously on how we behave and how we teach our children how to behave in this environment. So thanks for making that point, Trustee Reynolds.
Next on the list is Trustee Amos.
Thank you. My question, I have a concern about, there are families out there who can't afford masks and may not be able to send their children to school with masks, even though it's mandatory. So I guess it's maybe comes down to equity. What are we going to do to help provide or access to those who can't afford masks on a regular basis or don't have them, so that they're not centered out or and they're not made to feel different? I just don't know if we've had any conversations about that, but I just wanted to, I know there are quite a few families that are not in the position to be able to afford like the paper masks, to have a whole bunch of them available every day, or even the cloth ones. So I just wanted to find out if we had thought about that and what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you through the chair to Trustee Amos. Absolutely, we have talked about that and making sure that all families have access to masks is top of mind for us. In the shipment of PPE that is going out to schools, or has gone out to schools today and that's going out tomorrow, is a large collection of cloth masks. And any family can request some masks from the office, and the office will give as many as that family needs. We recognize that many of our students will not need a mask from the office, and therefore we want to make sure that this collection of cloth masks go to the people who want them and need them, and so they will get as many as they need. And if they need it before the first day of school, then I would encourage them simply to contact the office anytime after tomorrow, and the office will have those masks available.
Thank you for that. That's very good news, and I'm really glad to hear. If somehow we don't want to necessarily make it part of our messaging, but make sure that our administrators or whoever are reaching out to those families that they know have those difficulties, and that we can, if anybody knows of one, to share with the administrators, so that, because not everybody is comfortable about coming forward and they may not be aware that this is available to them. So I want to make sure that we're also trying to reach out to them. So thank you very much for that information, though. Thank you.
Okay, the next question comes from Vice Chair Harrison.
Thanks. Thanks very much through you, Madam Chair. My comments and question build on what Trustee Reynolds was asking and Director Miller's response. And I've been thinking about this a lot, that this requires it's a paradigm shift, because when I was more youthful than I am today, you know, it was a badge of honor that you went to work or school when you had a sniffly nose or whatever, because you could tough it out, and that was the way. And this is not those times anymore. So, but at the same time, there are these realities that people need to go to work, attend to other siblings, whatever their case may be. So I was reading about all of these new programs that have been announced for support, and there's just so many announcements and layers, it seems. One of the newer ones is a federal program around safe restart funding to create a temporary national sick leave program that will provide 10 days of paid sick time for those who don't already have it through their employer. So I was wondering whether it makes any sense at all for us to connect to our local MPs and get some information that we could include, or links to these programs that we could include to families to help to, I guess, build this new paradigm in a way that is as supportive as possible. Maybe that's for Director Miller or Superintendent Etoff.
Through your chair, Durban, to Trustee L. Harrison, I think that's all information at this point is good information. And I would say that that is good information for families and staffs to be aware of, because as you know, in our profession, the teaching profession, we have quite a good sick day policy or process, I guess would be the way to describe it. But that's not true for many of those families who send their kids to our schools. So I am going to I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Etoff, because I like the idea. It's just the logistics of how we do it, I think. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent Etoff, and Executive Officer McFadden might have a couple of comments on this as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. We have thought about this much in the way that this past year, when there was a support for families as a result of some of the pieces related to a government support during some of our job sanctions, and a support for families around childcare. And we as a board communicated that information in a variety of different ways to our families. And so we were very much looking to take a similar approach with this. Again, just as Director Miller stated, considering first what that might, what might be the best approach in order to do it. But absolutely, I think it's a fantastic idea.
And I could add that there is currently supports available for parents who must take care of children who have COVID. There's the infectious disease emergency leave and attendant EI that families can receive when they are looking after individuals who have an infectious disease, including COVID. So that is already available. Certainly we make that leave provision and EI support known to our own staff. I don't know how we would do a campaign to make that known to our parent community. And I am a bit concerned about the paid sick day notion, because right now I believe it's just in the realm of perhaps a draft bill in the legislature. I'm not sure that it's moving through the House, so I don't know how we would go about advertising that. I don't believe it's law yet, so I would be concerned about raising perhaps information that isn't yet law.
Okay, the next speaker on the speakers list is Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to comment and build on some of the comments and questions that were raised by Trustee Reynolds, L. Harrison, and speak to Superintendent Ruddock. I think it's great the work that we're doing around stressing the importance of the daily self-assessment. I'm understanding that there will be some great visual cues for students and families to keep as a daily reminder. And I think it's important for us as a system not to underestimate the importance of that messaging and coaching our students to tighten their social circles. That period of transition from the morning to the afternoon for the secondary panel is a very risky time frame. And also, any of the activities after school and on weekends. So our students need to understand the importance of that and being socially responsible. And I think our staff need to be also encouraged to take a sick day. As Trustee L. Harrison alluded to, we know that many people go to work sick, but in the time of pandemic, that's not what we can do or tolerate. I know that there are teachers who, particularly those who are teaching subjects for which it is not easy to find a substitute teacher. They are more at risk of feeling that pressure to go in, even when they're not feeling well. So I think we need to really deliver that message and let them know that it's okay if they're sick, they're not to come in, and substitute teachers will be found. So just my comment. Thank you.
Through you, Chair Gerbens, thanks for that, Trustee Oliver. Certainly through the messaging of our Human Resources Department and specifically Executive Officer McFadden, that's exactly the message that we have been giving to staff.
Okay, there are no more speakers at this time on the speakers list, so go right ahead with your next topic.
Great, I'll continue on with some new information around the outbreak protocol. As you may know, the ministry released some new documents, new guidelines last Wednesday, and we're suspending our time going through those new guidelines with public health in very close detail. We will be updating our communication protocols for a suspected and confirmed case of a student and a staff member. We'll make sure that the process is very clear around information sharing between both our public health unit and the schools. We also confirmed today that it will be public health that provides the letters to families that confirms a case in the community. And we'll make sure that we participate in the ongoing support and implementation of the infection prevention and control measures. And so we're going to partner with public health on that as well. This ministry guideline also included a requirement to post confirmed cases and cohorts that are required to self-isolate and closures of a class or a school on our website. So we'll be working with the communications department on making a page for this that lives on our board website and connects to our school websites. And the ministry is also rolling out a daily reporting requirement where administrators will input school-based data around confirmed cases into a portal. And then the ministry, in fact, follows up with a call with me each day to discuss the trends in that data and to highlight any specific concerns. So it's certainly evolving. Our outbreak protocol will continue to work with public health and update our existing protocols to align with the new guidelines.
Okay, I'm going to wait for a second to see if there's anybody who jumps on the speakers list at this point. And seeing none. So go right ahead with your next topic.
Thank you, Chair Durban. I will turn it over to Superintendent Etoff, who will be talking about the videos and some of the communication that's been going out.
Thank you very much. I'll just start with a reminder to our audience that last Wednesday night we held a virtual reopening schools session for families. That session was recorded and it has been posted on our website and shared through our social media platforms. Dr. McGanny attended that evening and provided a very informative presentation, which was followed by a Q&A involving a number of our senior staff. This live stream was extremely well attended. We had over 15,000 viewers, and that also translated into a pretty high engagement level on our website, with a significant increase in traffic there. Next piece I'd like to speak to is our reopening schools training and PD. While it's not directly connected to communications, I think it is important for the public to be aware that a lot of our professional development yesterday, today, and through to tomorrow has been centered on the supporting students and including ways that staff can support the implementation of those very important health protocols, as well as their mental health and well-being, for sure. Elementary and secondary back to school videos were released today. Again, they have been posted on our website as well as our social media feeds. And while they've only been up for a few hours, we've had already 7,000 views. So you can look for your favorite superintendents, Superintendent Blackwell and Superintendent Podjabarek, who have some starring roles, and we're considering some Academy Award nominations possibly. Moving forward, we know that two areas of anxiety for some of our parents whose students will be attending in person are very much what will the school bus transportation piece look like, as well as masking. And so a number of our communication strategies between now and school startup will be focused on that particular area. So you'll be seeing a lot more coming through on, for example, how to support your child and get your child ready to be wearing a mask for long periods of time in school. And so lots of tips and strategies that we'll be sharing with our parents to support getting their kids ready to return on September the 14th.
I'll just jump in. I think I'm next, unless there are questions.
There is one question, Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you to Superintendent Etoff. I think the video that was produced and put up they're absolutely amazing. The question that I am getting, though, is from the parents of the students who are in virtual school, and there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty as to what that virtual school is going to look like. So I wondered what resources we're going to put into communicating to those parents what their child's day is going to look like and what they can expect, because that's most of what I'm hearing now is that anxiety and that uncertainty. So if you could address that, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, and I'll start, and then maybe I'll turn it over to Superintendent Pennyfather or Associate Director Bogue. I know our communications team met with the virtual principals today, as well as the senior admin responsible for secondary and elementary virtual schools to discuss this very issue. And as Director Miller mentioned in his introductory remarks, we're building this from the ground up in every facet, including communication. So as simple as having a location for staff and phone lines and websites and all those pieces need to be considered. So as was mentioned at the outset, a communication is going home to those families who signed up for virtual learning. I believe that's going home tomorrow. But I'll now maybe turn it over to Superintendent Pennyfather, who may be able to provide a few more details.
Greetings. We have been receiving a ton of support from the various departments and of course our communications department, as Superintendent Etoff was saying, has been really helpful to us. They've actually designed a communication plan for us, and the websites are designed and should be up imminently. Also, School Messenger is set up for our virtual schools now, and the messages will be their first messages are going out tomorrow with that. And part of the function of the communication plan, it will also include how we're going to operate in social media as well. So there's a comprehensive plan, and over the next week, parents and students will be getting lots of communication from their administrators and then teachers from the virtual schools.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have another question here from Trustee Rocha.
Trustee Daniele asked my question and Superintendent Pennyfather elaborated, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. There are no more speakers at this time, so go ahead and continue.
Thank you, Chair Durban. And she already butted in anyway, our newest movie star, but we'll go straight to Superintendent Blackwell.
If I told you it took 7 takes to guide someone up the stairs, I'm not lying. So just very quickly, first a shout out to our families. I know that the intent to return survey date was extended a week to give families a chance to consider their options. And, you know, since we've last spoken or shared the data on return data, we've doubled the response rates in terms of our families responding. So thank you to them. So very quickly, our data is very similar to boards that are close to us in the GTA. We have 71% of our elementary students are returning to in-person learning, and 29% are returning to virtual learning. With secondary students, the in-person is 85% and virtual is 15%. And as I mentioned, it's very similar to other boards in the GTA. So what does that mean? That means approximately 13,000 students in elementary are selecting distance or virtual learning, and 3,500 secondary. We know that, and you've heard a lot this evening about creating new virtual schools. So that 13,000 students, that means we're putting those kids into classrooms based on their program. And so we can't do that in one school. It's just too big. So we have 3 elementary schools that have been created. One is the east, which is Oakville. One is the west, which is Burlington, and north is Milton and Halton Hills. And in secondary, there is 1 virtual school. It's a very, very large virtual school of 3,500 students. And we've attached administrators to the schools, mostly in the areas that they were from. We know that when we have that many students, 13,000 students leaving our elementary schools, we have schools where there's large numbers that have left, and those administrators have been assigned to some virtual schools as well. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a number of people on the speakers list. Trustee Gray, you can start.
Yes, I'll pass right now and come back on. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Shuttleworth, you're up.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Superintendent Blackwell. My question is actually a question that I've been asked from the community. So November the 30th is the first day of re-examining your choice. So what this person asked is, say it's a wonderful September and October and we have no cases, and we get to November the 30th and all these parents decide to put their kids back in school. Now a reorg is inevitable, but her question is will the classes be shuffled so that the friends will not be staying with their friends anymore?
Just let me start, Superintendent Blackwell, through you, Chair of Events, to Trustee Shuttleworth. November 30th is actually the day they could change. So I think people need to be aware that we'd be asking prior to that so we could be organized for the 30th. The 30th would be the change, but it would be, we'd have to ask a week or two before that so that we could do the reorganization. And with that, I'll turn it back to Superintendent Blackwell.
So through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth, the question is around kids that have built relationships with their classmates, whether it's virtually or in person. It will depend on the numbers. If we had a precedent in doing this, we'd be able to give you a definite answer, and we don't. So we're not sure what that's going to look like. If it's a large number of students that are changing from one modality to another, then classes will probably stay consistent. If there's a reduction, obviously the students will need to be reorganized because we'll need teachers, whether it be in the school or virtually, to work with those students.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I have two questions. The first question that I've heard from some community members in Halton Hills is it too late to change their minds? And I think I heard earlier this evening that on extenuating circumstances, principals may be able still to accommodate a very, very late in the game change. Just wanted to hear from Superintendent Blackwell if that's possible. And then I have a second question.
It is possible. Through the chair to Trustee Gray, it is possible, recognizing that we have built our classes and schools are working on building the virtual classes right now. We know that there will be some unique circumstances and they should reach out to their school principal.
Okay, thank you. My second question had to do with the staffing. And I'm not sure if we're having a report from Executive Officer McFadden. Maybe I should wait until that time.
Through your Chair of Events to Trustee Gray, we will. Superintendent McFadden will be giving an update.
Okay, I'll wait until that time. Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Blackwell.
Okay, there are no other questions, but I have one. So I was wondering, I actually started getting some questions today from parents that are part of the virtual elementary school, and they are having questions. You know, they need some support for special education, but not self-contained. You know, with IEPs and things like that, and they're just wondering where they reach out at this point to get that support. They reached out to their home school and they weren't able to get the support there because they're not really those students, I guess, at this point. So where should I be sending those virtual students? I mean, parents of virtually attending students.
So through the chair to the chair, I would maybe pass that off to, I see Superintendent Pennyfather is ready to go there with respect to staffing and supporting students with special education needs. And then Superintendent Zonnefeld's also very much aware of this.
And I would ask, I'm sorry, I would just, before Superintendent Pennyfather speaks, Chair of Events, we have designated 2 superintendents responsible for our virtual schools. Superintendent Pennyfather will be the responsible superintendent for the elementary virtual schools, and Associate Director Bogue will be the lead or the person responsible for our secondary virtual schools. So, and with that, I'll turn it back to Superintendent Pennyfather, and probably Associate Director Bogue may have some questions about the secondary panel.
To Chair Grabens, you're stealing all my content for my my part of the presentation with your excellent questions, but admin teams have been assigned. That's principals and vice principals. Also, special education teachers and EAs will all be part of virtual schools. So as soon as the principals have built the schools, they will be reaching out this week, and it would be and they will know who their principal is, and they can contact them, and they will help facilitate the whole process with IEPs, et cetera, and we as I said, we will have staff in the virtual schools, just like the bricks and mortar schools that can support students in this way.
Okay, thank you. There is another question coming up from Trustee Reynolds.
Okay, thank you very much through the chair. This question is about class reorganization. I'm just wondering if it can be known or shared at this time whether in the virtual class, whether there are combined grades or are they all single grade classes? And in the face-to-face and virtual, are there any threat of triple grading happening in our schools?
I can take that. Do you want me to take it, or do you want Executive Officer McFadden's ready to go?
Also, Superintendent Salmini, but she was having some technical issues. If whoever's ready to answer the question, if they could go either Superintendent Blackwell or Executive Officer McFadden, or if Superintendent Salmini's back on the line, who's going to take it? I guess it's you, Superintendent Blackwell. Oh no, there's Executive Officer McFadden.
Thank you. The question about, I can answer that there are split grades in the virtual school. However, there are no triple grades, and we have attempted to avoid splitting grades over division lines. So there should not be any 3-4 splits, for example. I think that answers your question. Was there a follow-up? Did I miss a part of it?
Sorry, so just to recap, so I understand that there are split grades in the virtual school, but there are absolutely no triple grading happening either in virtual or face-to-face.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, another question by Trustee Vidyalankara.
Hi, thank you, Chair Grabens. I understand that there's a wait list for the virtual school, so I was wondering if perhaps Associate Director Bogue could shed some light on this, as well as who this applies to specifically, and when parents and families can find out whether their child has been accepted into the virtual school. Thanks.
Sure, thanks for that question. And through you, Madam Chair, to the student trustee and all trustees, we have had some families that have made a choice and then have changed their mind. And as Superintendent Blackwell described, both the virtual schools and the in-person schools are very much involved in class building and timetabling their schools right now. So we've kind of frozen the timetable at the moment so that we can get the current kids scheduled. Any family who may have had a change of heart and made a change has sort of been put to the side for the moment. And once the timetable is built, then we can look at, particularly in our high schools, what courses still have some space left and where can we fit those students in. And so that's likely going to happen probably Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, realistically. And that's no different than in our bricks and mortar schools where we have a new registration at the last moment. We certainly want to accommodate the kids, but sometimes there may not be quite the same choice later on. And that would apply as well as we move throughout the year. We've got those natural points where we can make some changes. But folks that want to make a change in between those times are sort of at the mercy of space being available in classes, those kinds of things. So in response to your question, likely Tuesday to Wednesday of next week, those kids would definitely know what courses we were able to offer them in their either virtual or face-to-face school if they made a change.
All right, thank you.
Okay, there are no questions at this time on this specific topic. I know that there's still lots of questions that people have. They're just waiting for the right moment. So go ahead with the next topic.
Thank you, Chair Durban. I will turn it over to Executive Officer McFadden, who will be talking around the staffing and reductions of class sizes and so on, which I think many parents will be interested in. So go ahead, Executive Officer McFadden.
Thank you, Director Miller. As we've said, these are still a bit preliminary. However, we have completed staffing up to what we know today, and we have been able to address class size in many areas. So we did specifically add 24 teachers and 14 DECEs, designated early childhood educators, to our kindergarten classrooms so that we could reduce class sizes. We have in our traditional schools, so in our bricks and mortar schools, we have 244 kindergarten classes, and we have brought our average class size in kindergarten down to 20. From the regulated average, as you know, is 29. So that would be 20 with 2 adults. In our primary grades 1 to 3, we have 450 primary classes in our traditional schools. And there is a class size cap that designates that 90% of those classes must be capped at 20, and the remaining 10% can go above 20. We have an average of those 450 classes at 18.5. So that is our class size average in the primary grades in our traditional schools. In junior intermediate, grades 4 to 8, we have 809 classes, and these are funded at a regional average of 24.5. And in our traditional schools, our current class size average in junior is 22.6. So we have built our classes with a view to keeping them as small as possible, and we've been largely successful in lowering our traditional school class averages. And I'm happy to answer questions about class size.
Okay. Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Superintendent McFadden. That's great news about the numbers, but my question is you're speaking particularly in the grades 4 to 8 of the average class size. Do we know what the higher ends of those class sizes are? That brings the average up?
Yes, we have no classes over 26. We have 50 classes. We have no classes over 27. We have 50 classes between 25 and 26, and those would be our highest.
And follow up, so with those classes with those higher sizes, are they in buildings that the rooms might be larger to be able to cope sort of with the social distancing models?
So I can't speak to the class sizes within those physical buildings, but I can tell you that as I indicated, this is still somewhat of a work in progress, given the previous comments about There are still some parents that are undecided or who are changing their minds. We know, as we do every year in September, we have a September reorganization. So as our enrollments stabilize, once students actually return to school, and we see what our traditional schools look like, not just intent, but actuality, we will likely have a September reorganization process, as we normally do. And that will be our opportunity to further address some pressures of class size where we can, in terms of whether or not the school has a classroom and the capacity to add a class. So we have reserved some of our FTE, and I know Superintendent Ngoy is going to speak later on in the presentation about the finances we've received to address class size, and we have kept some of that back, both for possible need in our September reorganization process, and also in November, should we have a large influx of students back in traditional schools, and that skews our class sizes, and we have a need to add staff. So we have some in reserve, and we have 2 opportunities in the near future to address class size pressures.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, next question is Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. Wow, that is has to be one of the single biggest issues and concerns, not only in the Halton board, but across the province, that we hear about is class sizes. And that sounds really like great things are happening. Could you also comment on the outliers for the kindergarten and grade 1 to 3 classes? That is, how many are above those numbers that you gave us?
Through you, Chair Durban, can I just make a comment before Executive Officer McFadden answers that question? And it's because of the comment you made, Trustee L. Harrison, around the most contentious or the biggest generating issue is around class size. We've heard it. The unions have gone to the Ontario Labour Relations Board around this. We hear it all over the province. We hear it all everywhere, unions, etc., so on. I just want to comment on that before Executive Officer McFadden asks your specific question. This, as you are aware, and I was going to do this later, but you've actually given me a segue in with your question prior to Superintendent Ngoy talking about finances. The federal government awarded or provided funds to provincial governments for distribution, and they did not direct that. And there was a belief in many communities that this would decrease class sizes all over the place. As you know, we put out a message, both the chair and I have talked about, if we were to reduce all of our classes by half, we would need 1,200 additional teachers and roughly $150 million to do that. But I just want to point this out. I was listening to the radio today, and not that I'm quoting other parts of the country or whether I agree or disagree is not the point, but the Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, was talking about their share of the federal funds this morning, and the government, they estimated to reduce class sizes in Alberta in half would cost Alberta $4 billion. The federal government gave them $260 million, and so that's 1/50th of the estimated cost of reducing all classes in half size. That's a very similar circumstance here in Ontario. So I just wanted to point that out, given that you brought up around the class sizes and the desire for so many to have those classes all split in half. So with that, I'll turn it back to Executive Officer McFadden for her comments.
Thank you, Director Miller, and that is highlighted by our need to be strategic when we address the pressures of class size, which is what we've attempted to do thus far and what we'll do with the funds that we have kept back. So in terms of the outliers, in answer to your question, Vice Chair Harrison, in the kindergarten 244 classes that I mentioned, none of them are over the funded average class size that we're funded on of 26. So we have 0 over 26. In our primary classes, as I indicated, we are allowed to have 10% over 20. We have only 16 of our 450 classes over the class size of 20. And I already spoke to the intermediate in that we have only 50 classes over 25. And the funded class size there is 24 and a half.
Yep.
May I follow up?
Yes, you may.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. So with this, I don't know how to ask this question. I withdraw. Can't be done.
No problem. Trustee Gray. Oh, Trustee Gray is having some technical difficulties. So maybe I'll jump in while she's getting back. Oh, she back on? No, not yet. With regards to targeting, are we targeting areas that have a higher incidence in our region? If you look at the regional, the Halton Public Health regional site, it has a map and it outlines where there are sort of hotspots in Halton and, with regards to incidents. Are we targeting those areas, or are we targeting more areas that we just happen to end up with more space, which I don't have a problem with either. But I was just wondering what the targeting is.
So we did not target geographically. What we did initially with the initial 24 teachers and 14 DECEs was target kindergarten. And that had been expressed as a large area of concern given that the class size was so high and there was not mandatory masking in kindergarten. So we addressed our first efforts toward kindergarten and added staff where we could, where we had the highest class sizes and where we could affect the most change for the additional staff. In terms of hotspots in Halton, it's my understanding, and Superintendent Reddick may want to chime in here, that those hotspots, as you call them on the map, change very frequently. And in relation to what we hear about in the media as hotspots, our incidence in Halton would not actually be considered to be above average. So we don't have any true concerning areas of Halton that are consistently receiving more cases than others. That's my understanding last I asked that question, unless that's changed. So if Superintendent Reddick has something to add there, she may be able to enlighten us.
No, I think Superintendent McFadden said it very well. The incident, the rate of incidents in Halton, we're very fortunate. It's very low, and so. And at the moment, it is also quite evenly spread across the areas within our region. So to identify one particular community and suggest that that would be a hotspot, really, it doesn't really apply to Halton.
Okay, thank you. And Trustee Gray is back on the line, so I'll hand the mic to her.
Thank you very much, through the chair, to Executive Officer McFadden. In staffing our virtual schools, there have been some administrators moved from around in the system to be the administrators of the virtual schools. My question is, what is the time frame that these administrators understand their period of time will be at these virtual schools? And Secondly, are they guaranteed to go back to the school from where they came?
I can't speak specifically to our administrators, because that might be slightly different and it might depend on how long they had been at their previous school. I will say that all staff, administrators and teachers and our secretarial clerical staff who've been assigned to virtual schools all remain connected to their previous traditional school. So if there were a need, for example, to move teaching staff or administrators back mid-year, we would always attempt to move the people who had been moved out of that school. For staffing purposes, under the collective agreement, teachers are still remaining on the staff of their traditional school. There might be an instance where an administrator may be at the virtual school for the year and would have been up for a move anyway to a different school for the next school year. I'm not saying that that won't happen, but to speak generally, everyone at virtual school is still connected to their bricks and mortar school for staffing purposes.
Thank you. May I have a follow-up, a second question? Thank you.
Yes, you may.
My second question has to do with student enrollment in Halton. And I'm wondering, we have some students electing to go to school in person, some students electing to go to virtual school. Is there a great difference between the adding up of all of those students that we have currently and those that we may have expected this year? Could you speak to any surprises that we've had in our enrollment?
I can speak to how the enrollment has affected staffing. There may be fluctuations in enrollment of which I'm not aware, but in terms of staffing, I can speak to our kindergarten enrollment not having met our projection. Kindergarten is a slightly different grade in that it's not mandatory for parents to send their children to kindergarten. And given the current state that of the pandemic, there may have been many that may have been the reason why many have chosen not to send their children to kindergarten. So our kindergarten enrollment is significantly lower than we expected.
And through you, Chair Durban, to Trustee Gray, Superintendent Nagoy's got more to add on that, on enrollment.
Thank you. Through the Chair Durban to Trustee Gray. The entry point, so the junior kindergarten grade is always one that fluctuates from year to year. That is based on obviously birth rates as well as choice of students in terms of which school district they attend. It is based on development that come online. There have been quite some delays as a result of COVID as well in terms of finalizing construction and closing of housing, etc. So there are a number of different factors that impact the entry grade for junior kindergarten for our school or our district. We have been quite conservative in the projections, but when we did the projections, we were looking at regular trends as we were accustomed to over the years. As Executive Officer McFadden has mentioned, it is a possibility that there are parents of kindergarten students who decided not to enroll in any of the two options, whether it is to in-class learning or online, and we may be missing those. Other parents may not have been able to or have not done so online, an online registration. As schools open, we may see an influx of registrations as well. So the next couple of weeks will be crucial in finalizing that enrollment. And we will be able to provide more details at the next board meeting when our General Manager of Planning is going to be presenting the long-term capital accommodation plan as well to trustees.
And finally, I would just say, just as a reminder for those in the public who may not be aware of this, Some of us had thought that the largest drop in our enrollment would be at the kindergarten ages, because it's we're talking about 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And so many parents would have made a decision that, you know, they're not sending their 3-year-old to JK or the 4-year-old or so on. But I do want to remind the public, and I know trustees are fully aware of this, the legal obligation to attend school does not start until age 6. So it was a little, shall we say, easier for those parents not to enroll their students than it would be a 6-year-old in grade 1 and so on.
Okay, I'm going to call a recess. Actually, we've been sitting here for a while and I've had a few requests. Actually, I had a request for 20 minutes ago. So we'll come right back to this. I promise everybody. We're going to recess until 9:20. Okay, so everybody's welcome to turn their cameras off and definitely their microphones. Thank you. from Vice Chair Al Harrison.
We're still on the staffing questions for Executive Officer McFadden. Go ahead.
Okay, back in business here. Thanks very much. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is two-pronged, and that is about those outliers. Is it possible, can we spend our way and shave those off somehow? Or are there just too many moving pieces at this point? And do we have unused space that those extra classes could move to? Because it seems to me that's going to be a big point of discussion as well, if people are in the schools and they're seeing empty classrooms that aren't being utilized.
So I can start, and my colleagues can jump in if I leave any of the answer out. As I indicated, and as Superintendent Ngoy referred, right now we're basing our responses on intent, and much will depend on what actually happens when students return to school. We know from past experience that we need to reorganize in September based on actuals and actual students who come back to class. So we have held back some of the funding that Superintendent Ngoy will speak to later in order to address those outliers or other outliers that may be created when we see how enrollment actually ends up looking like in our schools. So we will be able to address class size further at that time, either in the September reorganization process, or we also have to be concerned and prepared for changes to cohorts at the time when the quadrimesters end in secondary, and in November when parents have an opportunity to change their minds about the type of school their child is attending. So to answer your question, there is space in schools, but we also have our virtual school teachers teaching out of their traditional schools. So there isn't as much empty space as one would think, because the virtual school is being taught out of board facilities. So therefore, that will be a consideration as well. Many things will go into where we put those additional dollars in order to address class size.
Do you have a follow-up, Vice Chair Al Harrison? Okay, thank you. Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. I'm having a really hard time figuring out where to ask this question, so I'm just going to ask it now, even though I don't know if it's the right place or not. So I'm sorry, Superintendent McFadden, if it's not your question. So I know we've spoken a lot about the training for students in high school, particularly for the Brightspace, and then in elementary schools to gain comfort with Google Classrooms. And I know as a board, we have offered many opportunities for staff to take optional training in the past. But what I'm wondering is, what opportunities are we giving for universal training for staff? And I was just wondering, with this upcoming week, when the students aren't in the schools, would the staff still be expected to be there? And could this not be seen as a place for this training to take place?
So I'll turn the training part of your question over to Superintendent Salmini and Hunt Gibbons, but I can answer the question around the use of the days when students will not be in class next week, and they are working days for our teachers. And as you know, because of the health protocols and the PPE requirements, many teachers would find themselves usually back in school the week before school starts, setting up classrooms, etc., and doing many of the tasks involved in startup of the school year. And they didn't have that opportunity this year. They arrived back at school yesterday, and went into some very structured professional development for the 3 days this week. So we know that there are many tasks that teachers need to do next week, but I will turn it over to my colleagues who can comment on the opportunities for training.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth, I'll comment on the secondary portion specific to Brightspace. So in June, all staff had mandatory training on Brightspace. It continued through the summer with optional self-directed learning, as well as PD sessions run by IPLs that were offered over the course of the last week. As part of the structured PD days that Executive Officer McFadden has just mentioned, Brightspace training is also part of that, and Brightspace training continues next week. So trying to ensure we are meeting everyone's learning needs, we have Brightspace training that takes the form of face-to-face learning in a virtual environment. We have self-directed videos. We have PowerPoints that show so that people can work through it on their own. We have on My HDSB a site dedicated to personal learning for staff on the topic of Brightspace. So we're trying to hit all modalities and ensure that staff are feeling comfortable, because of course people go into this as beginner, intermediate, and advanced users, and we want to make sure that everyone is feeling very comfortable, staff and students.
So if I may, through the chair to Trustee Shuttleworth, in terms of elementary, it is similar, except that our learning platform is Google Classroom. And through the spring and in the summer, there were multiple opportunities for staff offered, also differentiated for their entry level into using a virtual environment, because we have some staff that are quite skilled and others that would be more novice. And so we really tried to differentiate those opportunities. Next week, we are going to be offering opportunities for those teachers that are assigned to virtual school first, because we know that they are going to be up and running totally in that environment right away. We will continue to offer opportunities for our teachers that are in conventional school, because we are asking that they all have Google Classroom ready and functional in terms of communication, posting assignments, all of those things for students that may be at home because of illness or for reasons that they're not able to be at school during the period of time at home, and also so that they can switch into a totally virtual environment if that need arises. We've also provided resources that are not training sessions that are all at one time, so they can access materials on their own time as well. And our elementary instructional program leaders are all prepared to work with the administrators in the virtual schools to troubleshoot, to help teachers one-on-one or in small groups as needed as they move into the virtual school environment.
Can I follow up quickly? So Superintendent Salamini, I know that Superintendent Hunt given spoke of the mandatory training that happened in June with Brightspace. Has there been any mandatory training with Google Classroom in the elementary schools?
There has not been mandatory training yet for Google Classroom in our elementary schools. Superintendent Pennyfather and I can discuss that. If we were to do that, we would certainly start with those that are in our 3 virtual schools.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Trustee Lonkara.
Thank you. I wasn't exactly sure who to address the question to, but it's regarding health and safety protocols in relation to like kindergarten and primary elementary classes. So just from like personal experience, I remember when I was a lunchroom supervisor for kindergarten classes, there's quite a bit of physical contact between staff or supervisors with the kindergarten students when they need help with things like tying their shoes or zipping up their coat or whatever else it is. So I just wonder how now going into the return to school, teachers can still help students with things like that while still, I guess, maintaining, maybe not a safe distance, but just ensuring that they're doing so safely? Would they wear gloves? Would they have to hand sanitize in between helping students? So just wanted some clarity on that.
Super.
Yep, I can jump in through the chair.
I would just want to direct it to Superintendent Ruddock and perhaps Superintendent Salmini or Executive Officer McFadden as well.
So you have certainly described kindergarten very well as many of our primary classrooms, where there's a fair amount of very close contact in order to support a student, whether it's for learning or for a simple life skill. And this type of close contact will also occur in some of our other classrooms, like our life skills classrooms, community pathway programs, or a behavior resource classroom. And it's for this very reason that our staff are being provided medical grade PPE. So they are protected from students and their droplets, and therefore it mitigates the risk of them coming into close contact. So staff, when working with students, will always be wearing a level 1 medical mask. And then in addition to that, they can put on their visor. That is an added layer of protection. And then they will also be provided gloves if they are performing a task where they're handling bodily fluids or the risk of coming into contact with bodily fluids. So it's certainly not an expectation that in the kindergarten classroom, kids will be physically distanced at all times, or that the staff member will physically distance from kids. We know that that's not realistic, and we want our kindergarten classrooms to be supportive, caring environments. And with the PPE being provided, it will certainly be safe for our staff to do that.
Okay, the next speaker is Trustee Garretts.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Superintendents Hunt, Gibbons, and Salmini. No volume? All right, try this. How's that? Is it better? Okay. Are the same training opportunities being given to the occasional staff, the teachers and EAs that are going to be called in should our other staff take ill? And if so, are they also receiving remuneration for that so that they're prepared when they come into our schools, virtual and or brick and mortar?
I think I understood Trustee Garretts. I believe you asked whether or not our occasional teaching staff was going to receive the same training as our permanent teaching staff has received. And I believe I can answer that. We have both the reopening schools training and the COVID-19 awareness and prevention training online for our occasional staff, not only our occasional teachers, but our occasional OCTU staff, our occasional ECEs and EAs will all be taking that training online, and the Ministry of Education did provide us with funds to cover some of those costs of 1 day of pay for those individuals to take those extensive training packages online. So that has gone out to all staff this week. And the expectation is that they take those modules before they begin work in our schools.
Follow up, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. What I was also inquiring about was the Brightspace training, as well as the Google Classroom training, because those teachers that are coming into those classrooms need to be sharp and ready to go with those.
I'll interpret that. Oh, okay. Superintendent Salmini must also read lips, so she's prepared to answer.
Yeah, through the chair to Trustee Garrett, I'm understanding your question as being, will occasional teaching staff be given training opportunities in terms of Google platform in elementary and Brightspace in secondary? So I will answer the elementary. We certainly have had opportunities open, will continue to our occasional teaching staff. And I'm going to go back to the previous question because I know that Trustee Shuttleworth had asked me, had we done any mandatory training in terms of Google Classroom? And I responded no. And then I realized that we did do mandatory mathematics training during these 3 PD days. And as part of that, the program staff had organized that it needed to be accessed through Google Classroom. So in fact, that they had their math training, but also had some training in terms of the use of Google Classroom, and everyone would have had that. And so just wanting to clarify that piece. But certainly, yes, we would be including our occasional teachers because we know that they will need the opportunity to be able to step into classrooms when the teachers are away. And I'll turn it over to Superintendent Hunt Gibbons to respond for secondary.
Thank you. Through the chair, similar and secondary opportunities have been provided, and in fact, occasional teachers were more than welcome to participate in any of the voluntary sessions that have been held over the last week. We also had one specific to what you need to know as a supply teacher in Brightspace, and we plan to continue to offer that one as we know that there will be people new to our supply list potentially as well, and we will need to reoffer these offerings, so we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Okay, we are up to Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through your chair, this question is probably for Superintendent Ruddock. I understand that there will be a designated space in each school should a student fall ill while they are at school. And so there will also be a designated staff person that will be interacting with the student. I'm just curious, how are these staff designated? And will they be provided some additional training around precautions, etc.?
Through the chair to Trustee Oliver, that's right. Every school has been asked to identify an isolation room. And this room has been prepared specifically for a student who may develop COVID-like symptoms while they're at school. So it will only have wipeable surfaces, for example, in terms of furniture. And it will be assigned a supervisor. Each school-based action team was to seek volunteers for this responsibility. In all likelihood, it will most often be the principal or vice principal because they have the most flexibility in their schedule, but it's certainly not limited to them. They are also creating infection prevention kits for the isolation room, and these kits include additional PPE. So not only just, not in addition to the mask, the medical mask that staff are provided, they will use their face shield, gloves, and a gown. And they have, all staff have been trained on the process on how to manage a student who develops symptoms while at school. So everything from the teacher removing the student from the classroom, providing them a mask while they're being or having them cover their face with a Kleenex while escorted to the office, providing a mask. So it's not just the person that is supervising the room that has received that additional training, but all staff in the school. So any given staff member could be assigned to or could volunteer to supervise the isolation room. And staff members who have a sick child in the room know what to do also.
Okay, so we've kind of veered off. I'm going to corral us all back together, and we'll continue on with sort of the targeted questions in the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Durban. The next part of it is Superintendent Pennyfather and Associate Director Bogue As I had said earlier, Superintendent Pennyfather will be responsible for the virtual elementary schools, and Associate Director Bogue will be responsible for the secondary virtual school. So I will turn it over to, and I don't know which of them are speaking first.
Greetings and thanks again. A lot of about virtual schools has come out sort of as a logical next question in many of the other presentations, but I'll recap some, and there's some new information. So first of all, we have 4 virtual schools created, 3 elementary and 1 secondary. Just like bricks and mortar school, admin teams have been assigned, and it's staffed with teachers, ECEs, special education teachers, and EAs. Virtual schools will operate in many ways like regular in-person schools with individual classes, daily schedules, web presence, attendance, reporting, communication with families, and all the things that you have in a regular school. Again, a thanks to communications for helping our principals develop communication plans and designing websites that will be up in the next couple of days. The program department, you've heard just recently about all the many offerings they have, but they also they have put themselves made themselves available to the administrators so that they can pinpoint issues that need special training or addressing. So we thank them for that. And Student Services is currently finalizing a support plan for students with special ed profiles, so how best to deliver those services in these environments. And we're having ongoing conversations about that as well. Thank you.
Okay, see if there's any questions about what Superintendent Pennyfather has said. Seeing none, go right ahead.
So the next part of the update is around the finances, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Nagoya. She's got a few slides that she will post up. I just want to reiterate with for trustees, I know trustees are well aware of this, but some in the public may not. I'm not going to repeat the comments I made earlier that after Trustee L. Harrison had brought up, and I talked about Alberta. But there are immense pressures on the finances. And yes, we have had additional funds, but those additional funds have not been sufficient to cover all the costs that we may have at this point or the priorities we'd like to set. So having set the stage, I will now pass it to Superintendent Nagoya.
Thank you, Director Miller. I will share my screen.
Superintendent Nagoya, you sound like a robot.
Okay, I'll be back.
I'm sure Superintendent Nagoya will be back momentarily.
Superintendent Nagoya will also speak a little bit about transportation and where we are and where we think we're going to be.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Perfect.
This always seems to happen right before a budget presentation. It's a sign. I will attempt to share my screen. We have a few slides that trustees have received as well, and they are being linked to our agenda. So I hope you can see my slides. I'm quickly going to go over just a little bit of a background on the total provincial funding that has been made available as a result of COVID. If we look back at the GSN announcements, the grants for student needs that were announced back on June 19th, at that point, the government of Ontario announced about 29 million in additional funding for COVID-related costs as they pertain to additional technology, mental health support, and additional cleaning. Later on July 30th, the province announced the back-to-school reopening plan and provided an investment of $309 million in addition to that. And this included items such as additional staffing, additional cleaning and custodial staff, technology, special education, supports, and mental health. And then further on August 14th, there was another announcement for the guide to school reopening and additional funding for improving air quality or ventilation in schools, as well as support for the remote learning, so support for establishing virtual schools for a total of 68
I'm going to turn on the weather network for you.
On August 26th, the federal government has announced a $2 billion investment Canada-wide. And for Ontario, that meant funding of in two phases. The first amount is 381, so half was being provided to the government of Ontario for 381 million now, and the other half is to still be approved in December once the fiscal update for the country is reviewed at that point in time. And this funding was provided to the government to trickle down to school boards in part for additional COVID-related support. So out of all that funding, which probably is around the 800 million mark provincially, not the entire amount has been allocated by school boards. A portion was held back to provide support for the supply of personal and protective equipment, and sanitizer and cleaning products and other things that are centrally being deployed to school boards. And a part of them also reflected funding for public health nurses to assist with schools as we open. So our board's funding allocation amounted to 6 million from the province and 6.4 million from the federal government. So that's a total of 12.4 million funding for our board. And we are a board of over $800 million in terms of total budget. So that is about just less than 2% of our budget. So in terms of what the funding was allocated for, it has to be used for certain parameters as established, with the exception of one, which I'll address in a minute. The additional caretakers for 1.6 million and additional cleaning supplies were provided. There's health and safety training for occasional and casual staff for that 1 day of training that we have to provide to our staff. There's special education resources, supports, assistive technology or learning tools that we may need, mental health resources, training and support, transportation, both in terms of cleaning, addressing some additional routes, inefficiencies, etc. Improving air quality in schools, additional technology that we may have to deploy for online learning. Setting up the virtual schools requires a number of staff for school administration and school support staff, as well as resources for those schools, and additional staffing. So for additional staffing, that's in particular additional teaching staffing or in-classroom staffing. We've received 0.8 million from the provincial allocation and 1.9 million for the federal portion. So between those two, that's 2.7 million, and another about $500,000 for special education. Between that funding, that is the amount of money that we had in addition to provide resources to address class sizes or any reorganization that resulted as a result of online and in-class assignments of students. The last one there, addressing local pressures, is a generic pot of money, 2.9 million for our board, which was provided for, in more generic terms, can be used on any of the above areas that are COVID related. It could be staffing, it could be additional cleaning or supplies or technology, etc. So that is a look at the total funding that we've received since the Grants for Student Needs and since we've approved the budget until now. And the next couple of slides, I wanted to outline what are some of the priorities where we've identified that we'll be spending the funding. There's a number of staffing positions, and the total cost for these is around 9.6 million. I'd like to just clarify this is still being finalized. The organizations are being finalized, the enrollments, etc. So there will be some changes as we come back to trustees once we have the information that we need finalized. We will be asking trustees to approve the use of reserves for some additional initiatives. For now, we have an addition of 32 casual custodians, 20 secondary teachers, 24 kindergarten teachers, and 14 early childhood educators to assist with reducing some of the larger class sizes in kindergarten. There's 10 additional elementary teachers for grades 1 to 8. There's an additional number of special education teachers to address the need for an increase in either gifted or self-contained classrooms for the virtual schools. This organization is currently being finalized, so we don't have the exact number, but we're looking at a number, a range, and how we organize some of the in-class sections that we have. Mental health professionals as well as training, that is also being currently finalized. And we have looked at the 4 virtual schools in terms of the school administration, school support, clerical support, guidance, and financial support for those schools. So all of the staffing additions are currently around 9.6 million in costs. The other related expenses for COVID that are outside of the staffing, we are looking at upgraded filters. We've placed an order already for upgraded filters for all of our schools for the entire year. And we're looking at portable air filtration units that will be placed in certain classrooms based on the local needs where they could have the largest impact. We are also looking at providing the health and safety training during this week for all of our occasional casual staff and for permanent staff in schools. We do still have to purchase personal and protective equipment and cleaning supplies and sanitizer, etc., for our schools and buses that fall outside of the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services centralized deliveries because of a limited number of items that are in stock or that have been provided by the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. So we do need to set aside a budget for that through the year. We have lost transportation efficiencies as a result of the adaptive model at the secondary level. So the midday dismissal has created some loss of efficiencies. It could be quite significant. It could be around the $2 million mark. However, we are still finalizing those routes. There is a little bit of additional money provided from the federal government to assist with the need for these additional routes and loss of efficiencies. Technology to support the online learning. There's also been additional funding for that, and we have placed as many orders as we could in advance in this prior year that just ended in order to prepare for school reopening. However, we are going to be ordering more technology to support the online learning. And of course, we have to set up operating budgets and additional resources for virtual schools. There could be additional licenses, additional software that is required to be used. If there are specialized classes, there will be some learning materials and equipment that will have to be ordered, and all of that has to be set up as well. And then we're also looking at various items for outdoor education and what we can do there. And there's a report that will be coming back to trustees with more information on this item. So that is about $6.8 million in terms of non-staffing related expenses that we've identified to date. If we put those together, the proposed costs do exceed already the funding allocation that we have been provided by the province as well as the federal government. So we've received $12.4 million in total, and the costs add up to $16.4 million. So we do expect about $4 million will be the impact on our reserves in order to cover for these. There's also additional pressures on our reserve as we continue to look at the year ahead, at our rental revenues, the impact on international students, etc. We're going to provide a financial update to trustees in October once we have September under our belt and we have more information. And at that point, trustees would be able to get all the information on what we expect or where we project the impact to be on our reserves, and what is the additional amount from reserves that we would ask trustees to approve for us to be able to use for the year. And I would be happy to take any questions trustees may have. Thank you.
Through your chair of events to Superintendent Ngoy. Superintendent Ngoy, could you very briefly describe where we are with busing as with transportation? Just for, and then I think questions come after that. They can be, because they're somewhat related. So.
Absolutely. In terms of busing, the data is being provided to our consortium. Of course, it's a time crunch to put together all the routes. There has to be assigned seating by classroom cohort in the buses. Also, data in terms of opting out of transportation has been trickling in, and thousands of emails have been received by our transportation officers, and various situations have been worked through. In terms of busing, it will be a very challenging start of the year. As Director Miller mentioned before, we are not able to provide busing for the orientation days next week, with the exception of those self-contained classes, except gifted, for example, and the CPP classes. We will have transportation starting September 14th when school resumes in full. However, we do expect significant delays as drivers are learning their routes, their students, the tags, etc. Students learn the protocols on the bus, which everything is different. So we do expect that there will be quite some significant delays. Also, today is the day, the deadline for the bus drivers to announce their intent to retire or not return in September. So we are gathering that data to see what the impact is in terms of driver shortage. As soon as we have information on delays on routes or routes that may be canceled altogether if we don't have the drivers, we will be informing families. But I do want to be very honest about the challenges that we have this year, in particular for transportation.
Thanks, Superintendent Goy.
Okay, so as I'm looking to the speakers list, I'm sure there will be some questions. I just want to clarify. So between the provincial and the federal government funding, we are receiving $12.4 million, and that's for all of our COVID-related stuff. And then we have to put another $4 million of our reserves in. And in order to, I have one question. So does that, how much of our PPE have we purchased at this point? Or is it for 1 month, 2 months, the year? Could you tell me that, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Certainly. So I think that's a great question. We have ordered a month's supply through the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. So we're doing 1 month at a time. However, as a board in the prior year, we have purchased PPE that is in some of the cases for 2 months, if we could. So in terms of sanitizer, for example, but overall it's a month at a time.
Okay, I'm very interested to get the sort of interim financials as we go along. I know that people have been yelling at us to lower class sizes, and we've told people that it would take over $100 million, $120 million for us to lower the elementary school class size, and it's just sitting in front of us. We've received $12.4 million. Okay, so I'm looking to the speakers list. Trustee Shuttleworth, go right ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Superintendent Ngoy. My question is that $4 million that we're spending, what does that do to, so we had to have a compliant budget, and I know they gave us permission to spend our reserves, but what does the loss of that money do to us as a board? I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know. Yes, you got it.
Through Chair Gravens to Trustee Shuttleworth, that's an excellent question. The Minister of Education announced recently that we could, as a board, use up to 2% of our reserves and still be in compliance and not require minister's approval. So they have actually increased the percentage for compliance for our board, which means that would allow our board to use an additional 8 million or so from our reserves towards any priorities for COVID. So we will still be in compliance. What will happen at revised estimates, we will update what our in-year deficit recovery plan looks like, and it will be a higher amount. Is it going to be higher by 4 million? This is a point in time estimate, and it's very much developing. So we'll have a much better idea in October where we're heading. And again, once we have the October 31st count date for enrollment, and we can certainly determine our grants, revised estimates will paint a much clearer picture. I expect we'll have a larger deficit than what we have filed at budget estimates. But I'm very hopeful we will be within that 2%, which will now be still within compliance.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Harrison, you're up.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I think this follows on nicely with the last question. And what's your philosophy around going to that 8 million from reserves? Because I'm thinking on balance with all of the needs and with Chair Grabentz's observation that the funding provided by the two levels of government is inadequate to cover, I guess, our wishes and those of the community. Do you see us going to that maximum amount from reserves?
Can I start this question, Chair Grabentz? I think it's actually a two-part, because you said, what do you think the chance? Second part of your question was, what do you think the chances are we get to that reserve? And the first one is, what is your philosophy? And I think as director, I'm probably the one that should respond to that. But I think the trustees themselves also obviously have a big stake, because they would have to approve that. So I think trustees have to dig deep into their thinking is how they want to do it, because those reserves are there for a purpose. They're reserves for, and we've got lots of plans for them. So it's a significant decision to dip into them, because it means somewhere down the line, something else is going to have to give, and we won't be able to do. But I would suggest, as director, I'm a little more comfortable going to the line, the cut line, so to speak, in the reserves for this year, given the unique nature of the school year that we're in. However, I did say earlier in earlier comments that there's a temporary feel around this, that most of the world seems to think we're limping along until a vaccine comes along. I still believe that that's going to happen, but we're a way off from that, and we have to learn to live with the virus. And we may need those reserves this time next year to be able to continue living with the virus, or later in the school year, or one of those other things. So I think it's a tentative. Yes, I'm comfortable as director, but trustees themselves would have to be comfortable as well. So that's the first part, and then I'll let Superintendent Nagoya answer about whether we think we're going to get there or not.
Absolutely, that's an excellent question. In terms of whether we believe that we will require the additional dip into the reserves, I think that's very possible. It all depends on how the year unfolds, what the cost of various things are, how much we have to procure outside of what the ministry is able to provide us in terms of the PPE supplies, for example, what the cost of those may be at some point in the year. We have seen the costs, increase exponentially. Now they've come down to more manageable levels, etc. It depends on the volume you're purchasing. The biggest costs that we have are staffing. The additional staffing that we're adding in order to address local needs. And that could change through the year as well. So I cannot say how much of that reserve we would, potentially use right now until we have that stability in the system with the enrollment and the class sizes and all the structures being finalized, which is why we need a little bit more time. But in terms of philosophy, it has always been, making sure that we have the right staff and we're able to provide the education within a class size that makes sense, as Executive Officer McFadden has mentioned earlier in her report. So that is our philosophy and our focus for the funding, as we may come back with some additional number of teachers, etc., in order to meet that philosophy and approach. As treasurer, I am very wary of going into more reserve and having that, future forecast in my head. Where are we going to end up the year? Is there going to be a part or a point in this year where we can't afford anymore to continue at the same pace. And that's going to be the discussion that we'll have to have as we have those updates, financial updates for the year, and see where we go. So I would not be very comfortable in assigning a lot of the reserve up front, having some of it just in case emergencies arise would be very prudent, as opposed to outright assigning all of the up to the maximum amount of reserve that we could.
Okay, thank you very much. It's after 10 o'clock, so we need to have a motion to extend. I was wondering, as Trustee Garretts, if you would be interested in making a motion, and if you have a guess of appropriate timing that might be good.
Yeah, I'd like to put a motion forward, but I'd like to shoot for 30 minutes. I don't know if that's going to be realistic, but yeah.
Okay. I see. I'm just kind of looking on my screen and around the room here.
I couldn't hear her. How long was the time?
Oh, she said 30 minutes. Okay, so I have nods in the virtual world as well. So we will, I need a seconder for that motion. Actually, Trustee Oliver, thank you very much. I see you there. So is there any further discussion on this? Please interject. Seeing none, so everybody, could you go to your voting form for a 30 minutes extension? I'm still missing a couple of people. If you could check if you've actually submitted your vote. There's 12, and that's it. Okay, good. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We have an extension of 30 minutes. Trustee Rocha, you are up.
Thank you. Through the chair to Superintendent Ngoy and perhaps Superintendent Etoff. Superintendent Ngoy, you talked about potential delays with busing in respect to kids and bus drivers learning new routines. Do you know if there are any videos in the works to help train kids to navigate in the new busing world? So to help alleviate any stressors and any potential delays that can occur that first few weeks of school.
I can jump in here, although Superintendent Ngoy maybe be able to provide some further insight. My understanding, I know that Marnie Denton was on a call and has been in constant communication with HSTS and Karen Lacroix. And my understanding is there is a video in the works, but it's being produced at a provincial level. And so we are waiting for that, and that's why we haven't initiated anything at the local level at this point. So we're looking to get some updates over the next couple of days, and I'm hoping to be able to have that so that we can use that to help transition students back, particularly those obviously that are using student transportation.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Trustee Daniele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Superintendent Ngoy or possibly Superintendent Truffin. I noticed on one of the slides there was an allocation of $500,000 on slide 2 for technology. And I'm just wondering where we're at. I know in the spring we made devices available to the majority of students who needed them, as well as Wi-Fi signal. And I'm wondering where we are with that initiative and what's needed for this term.
Good evening, and
and to the chair and to Trustee Daniele and Superintendent Ngoy, I'm happy to answer that question, and please fill in if I don't answer the question, or if you want to add more. So yeah, thanks, Trustee Daniele. You know, I'll just remind trustees, our principals did an amazing job in the spring when this happened last March. If you recall, our administrators worked really, really hard to give out close to 6,000 devices to families and students in March. And they did that quickly. They did that over a 2-week time period or 3-week time period. This fall is a little different because not everyone is distance learning. So we have a hybrid. We have some in elementary, we have some students who are doing face-to-face learning and distance learning, and in secondary, we have students doing distance learning and face-to-face learning. All of them are doing that. So it's posing a different type of challenge for us. So really what we've asked our principals, and something that we've already sent out to our principals, is we're asking principals to balance the needs. And what I mean by that is, you know, principals are going to, again, take feedback from their families and their students, but there has to be a balance. You know, we can't provide 3, 4, 5 devices per family. We just possibly can't do that. So for sure, absolutely, if a student needs a device or a family needs a device, we'll start with that. And then they'll determine how many additional devices they can give away. I believe it was Trustee Oliver who at the last board meeting asked something similar. And we just simply do not have 65,000 devices to give out to our families. But I know our principals, and I've been in contact with them a lot the last couple of weeks. They'll do their best to make sure that they get a device to the students that need them. And you saw Superintendent Ngoy's slide deck. We are still dealing with a supply chain issue with some devices. There's a little bit of a gap on how long we can get them, but trust me when I tell you, we're being very diligent, and when our vendor says they have devices available, we order them, and we order them pretty quickly. And at our schools, with the budget passing in the summer, that there was a budget for schools for additional dollars on top of their decentralized budget to order devices, and we're hoping to get that budget out to our principals very, very soon so they can get an additional order, so we get that devices back into school. And then in terms of internet connectivity, again, we supported families. We supported our families with internet connectivity, and we will continue to support families who are in financial hardship, who would otherwise not be able to afford home internet, and we will continue to do that, partnering with our vendors. So hope that answers your question, Trustee Daniele, and thanks very much.
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone on the speakers list right now, so I'm going to jump in for a question. With respect to the quadmester system that we have at the secondary level, our students, because of our delay of 4 days, does that affect the learning or the amount of time in the quadmester? I've had this question a lot.
I turn that to Superintendent Hunt.
Thank you, through the chair, to our chair and all of the trustees. The quadmester system is not 100% equal because, of course, there are holidays that fall within the various quads. And so we are lucky that in the first quad that we have a little bit of a cushion. So this delayed start to the beginning does not have an impact on our instructional hours or model in any way. And so we are not worried about that. In fact, if you started to count up days and hours in semesters, you would see that there's usually more holidays in one than the other. And certainly it's no different in quads this year. It's actually quad 3 is slightly shorter. So we're not worried about the first quad at all.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Trustee Taylor. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to, I think Superintendent Nagoy would be able to answer this best. Are the bus drivers receiving any mandatory training for this upcoming school year, or is it just optional, or how's that going to work?
Through Chair Durban's to Student Trustee Taylor, bus drivers undergo quite a lot of mandatory training, training on an annual basis, as well as the initial training for becoming a bus driver is quite strict and lengthy. They are also having their health and safety training as part of the beginning of the year. So yes, they are. It's going to be a different type of operation this year, and they have to ensure that they learn their routes, they learn the protocols, etc., in addition to the training that they would have in a normal year.
Thank you.
Okay. I have another question, and there's been some interest on school councils for fundraising to get tents and other outdoor equipment to support outdoor learning. And I know that there are equity issues across our board. Some schools can certainly raise more funds than others. And so is there any thought to having some sort of board-wide fundraising, like a central pot that then could be distributed equitably across the board?
Through you, Chair Drabens, and to all trustees, before we talk about the fundraising, I think it's important we talk about the tent issue. So I'm going to turn it to Superintendent Puccetti first to talk about the utility of tents going up on our board properties and so on. And then I will pass it to Superintendent Puccetti goes straight to Superintendent Nagoy to talk about there's logistical and practical elements about doing a board-wide fundraiser, but there are also legal elements around it as well. And Superintendent Nagoy can talk about that. So go ahead, Superintendent Puccetti.
Thank you, Director Miller, and through the chair, to the chair. So outdoor tents as a permanent or semi-permanent structure, first of all, we would actually require a permit from the municipality to put up a tent. And then there are other concerns about having a tent semi-permanently outside on the grounds from a vandalism point of view, from a durability point of view, and how are they going to be used? I think we need to really understand exactly what their use might be. Some of the tents that people have expressed interest in ordering are not particularly sturdy tents. And then when you start looking at those sturdier, more enclosed tents, you run into the same kind of issues that we have in terms of ventilation, how many people are in the tent, what is kept in the tent and what needs to be cleaned. So I think there are a lot of issues around the whole tent question that we need to study a little bit more fully to better understand where they could be used, how they could be used, and how to address some of those concerns with things like vandalism and security and durability.
And in terms of fundraising, fundraising for a structure, a tent that would accommodate a learning space that falls under temporary accommodation under the Education Act, we are not allowed to fundraise for anything that has to do with delivering curriculum, whether it is the space, adding to the square footage of a building, or temporary accommodation. So we're not allowed to actually fundraise for tents for outdoor education. In addition to what Superintendent Puccetti had mentioned in terms of the other concerns or questions that we're still looking into in terms of liability and operationalizing it, etc. What would that look like in February? Logistics of the furniture and what's stored in it, and who moves it back and forth from the main building, etc.
And finally, I would just add the actual practicality and the logistics of doing a central fundraising where all school councils contributed. We would have to develop a structure within our board, an administrative structure to manage the money was coming in and rules and criteria, how it was distributed and what it was distributed for. I think it would pose a real challenge for us or any board. We're trying to stretch the limit right now getting to stuff, and then we'd be adding another layer there. So it certainly would be extremely challenging.
Okay, thank you very much. I am seeing no more speakers on the speakers list. So we are going to move from this topic. We are going to go to 5.4, notices of motion. If you have a notice of motion, could you please add your name to the speakers list? Seeing none. So we are up to 5.5, Director's Report. Go right ahead, Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Gerbents. I have nothing to report. It was all in the reopening report that we had there. Other than I wish everybody the best as we go back to school.
Okay, so we're up to 5.6, communications from the chair. So there are a number of letters listed in the agenda package from other boards. They're a good read. Really, there's a lot about reopening schools and funding reopening schools. There's also a letter there on Bill 197 about director qualifications. Whenever we get a letter through our Ontario Provincial School Board Association, we try to include it into our agenda so that it gets a bit broader a read for people, and hopefully the public will further understand what's happening in education in Ontario. And the Halton District School Board has written 3 letters to the minister regarding the reopening of schools and building the education system back better, in a better manner. These letters are available on the hdsb.ca website for the public to review. So the HDSB and the Halton community are functioning in times that are beyond any of our prior experience. We want to let staff know that trustees support the work you are doing to create the best learning environments you can for students to meet their curricular expectations. The priority in these times is the health and safety of students and staff. Trustees, staff, families, and students must all do our part and commit to at-home self-assessment before entering our facilities, and to make sure that if someone exhibits any symptoms, that they stay home. Also, as was said earlier, to really be mindful of what you yourself or what your family is doing. Extraneous, trips to the mall for fun perhaps is not the best choice these days. Parents and guardians must make sure that they have solid childcare plans in event that their child or they themselves become sick. Parents must have a solid plan for who will pick up their child if they become ill at school, and the logistics of how that will happen. We can't, as parents, just wait until it happens, and then we have to be prepared. As a whole community, we have to be prepared. We can't depend on our schools to do everything for us should something happen. Being prepared to act immediately will help everyone stay safer and healthier. The next time the board has a meeting will be after instructional time has begun. I know my own children are looking forward to school, even in these overshadowed times, and I know that the staff at their school will do their best to keep them safe and engaged in their studies. I want to wish everyone good health, happiness, and strength in this time. So we're going to move on to committee reports. Are there any committee reports tonight? Trustee Gray, go right ahead.
Thank you very much through the chair. I just wanted to announce that the next audit committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 29th of September, and everyone's invited to attend that meeting.
Thank you for that information. Okay, so next, Trustee L. Harrison, go right ahead. Vice Chair L. Harrison. Sorry about that.
No worries. It's all good. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is about Committee of the Whole, and we have been having them on the second Wednesday between board meetings, and I'm just looking at our agenda planner that we had going, and there are no items that are of an urgent nature that were scheduled for September. So I look to my colleague to see whether, and the gigantic bug that has entered the room, it's a cicada. Yeah. Anyway, sorry everyone. It's right above my noggin at this point. Whether we should be scheduling that committee of the agenda meeting or whether we should utilize the time for the subcommittees that are working, such as the school naming group. We have some DPR planning that we need to do that was by motion. So I would just like some feedback on that. I saw people nodding generally when I mentioned subcommittee work and dedicating that time next week. So General Manager Gortmaker, if I'm not out of line here, we can do that.
Most certainly, Tracy.
Pardon me?
Sorry, Vice Chair Al Harrison.
What did you say? Most certainly. Okay, so why don't we do that? I will send out I'll send out a message to trustees encouraging them over the next little while that I know trustees have been meeting in subcommittees all summer long actually, and just want to acknowledge that, but that we would dedicate that time or time around then to continue and advance that, and that we look to October to bring those topics back. Because they're not of highly time-sensitive nature, and that staff then are able to focus on the work that they're doing and come back to the next board meeting with updates and so on. Okay, thanks so much.
Great, thank you very much. Trustee Oliver.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted to let you know that the first meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee for this new school year, 2020-21, is scheduled for September 15th. That's Tuesday at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, we're up to 5.8, trustee questions and comments. Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you very much. I have two questions through you, Madam Chair. One comes to us from community members related to the video that is being watched, which is wonderful. I'm not sure if we have metrics on how many people have viewed those already, but one of the questions that has arisen is just with respect to the 1 meter measuring and distancing between students. So how will that be measured? Is it between chairs? Is it between desks? How does that work out when it's on the ground in the classroom?
Chair, through you, Chair of Events, to Trustee Al Harrison. Superintendent Etoff can answer your question around the number of views of the video, and Superintendent Ruddock can talk about the distancing in the classroom. So Superintendent Etoff, then Superintendent Ruddock.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Right before we came on, I haven't checked over the last couple hours, but we were at, I think between the two videos, over 7,000 views. So it's getting a lot of traction, and that was before we had posted into some of our social media platforms. So that was just based on our note home to families today with the links.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Al Harrison. I'm sorry, could you clarify measuring the distance between the chairs in the classroom? Was that the question?
Through you, Madam Chair, the question is, how will that 1 meter be measured? Is it between chairs or is it between desks? And is that the norm or the exception, i.e. are there opportunities for more in some places, but it will never be less than that?
So the amount of distance between a student's chair, because ultimately we're looking at distance between person to person, right? And so we are advising when staff are setting up the rooms that they're using the chair as the point of measurement. So from chair to chair, how many students are in a room, and the size of the room will depend on how much distance will be between each chair. But based on the mock-ups that we've done in various classrooms in different schools, we have found that at the minimum we can get 1 meter, and in many cases we can get 2 meters. But as I say, it will really depend on the size of the room and the size of the class.
Do you have a follow-up?
It's unrelated, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
If there's on the list.
Okay, Trustee Taylor, go right ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Gerbens. I've been a lot of students have reached out to me wondering about some very physical classes, like gym class or auto body or wood shop classes like that, and if these classes will be running online and in school, and if so, how that will work with all the new protocols and procedures.
Thank you, Trustee Taylor. I will turn that over to Superintendent Hunt.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Taylor. Yes, all courses will be running, assuming sufficient student enrollment in the courses, regardless of whether the students have opted to take them in the virtual school or take them within their bricks and mortar school. A credit is a credit counting towards graduation. There's nothing in the curriculum that says what one has to do from an instructional point of view in order to earn the credit. What will change is the pedagogy. Those instructional strategies will have to vary. One, because of COVID and just keeping everyone safe, and two, depending on whether or not you're in person in a classroom or if you're online. And so in courses like phys ed, the safety features are that if you are in the outdoors, you have the different set of rules than if you are indoors. That is specific to how much you're exerting yourself, whether you should be wearing a mask, the sharing of equipment. Anytime that equipment is being shared by students, there are protocols about how it must be cleaned in order to be shared and what is allowed to be shared. So when there is an opportunity to provide students with a personalized equipment, so example would be like an art kit, a sketch pad, and your own materials to do that, then we will be doing that so that we don't have to worry in any way about the sharing. If we were talking about something like an auto hoist, which we can't give you your very own, so we won't be able to do that, we have to talk about safe ways for that to happen, and that's part of why courses are cohorted into 15s, so that we don't have people very close together. The teacher will have to manage whether or not he or she is doing a demonstration and students are watching, or whether it is one student who is operating or students who are 6 feet apart and doing various things. We've also purchased software simulation or simulation software for many of our technology areas, so that if you don't get to do it in person, you're still seeing how it works through this simulation software. And we've been training our tech teachers on this with our voluntary offerings over the course of the last week. Similar to other courses, science, so doing an experiment, if it's doable where you can do it without being in close proximity to other people or sharing, it will continue at the discretion of the teacher. It may have to continue in the form of demonstrations or even smaller groups, but staff will be working that out. No students are going to lose opportunities to take any credits. I'm getting this question a lot. People are worried about the more experiential in nature courses. We actually have an experiential learning lead in our board, and her job is to help ensure that teachers are finding the way to continue to provide those opportunities to students and teach those experiential courses in a way that allows for that learning cycle to continue. So if you would do us a favor of spreading the message that the high school students don't have to worry, that those courses are being offered, and if they signed up for the arts or or technology or anything else, virtual or at home, they will see those on their timetable, and we will be delivering those credits to students. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Trustee Amos.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank all the superintendents, the director, and everyone who's been involved in getting this school year on track. I know we've had a lot of bumps in the road and a lot of detours, and you guys have done an amazing amount of work, and I hope that at some point we can make it up, show appreciation appropriately, because I know a lot of you have gone without sleep, and just the amount of hours that you've spent, it's just been amazing. So thank you very much to each and every one of you. My question is International Baccalaureate program and some of the other optional programs that were available, but I just want to put it out there in the public realm why we are not being able to offer it virtually. I just like to have an explanation. I know there's been a letter that have gone home to parents, but I'd like to have it go out publicly here as to why we were not able to accommodate students to be able to have the International Baccalaureate program on as a virtual program.
Superintendent Hunt Gibbons, and perhaps Associate Director Bogue may weigh in as well.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Amos. You are correct, and it is unfortunate that we are not able to provide all programming and all different formats to everyone to satisfy everyone. If we could, we would, but quite simply, unfortunately, we're unable. We did survey everyone, and I'll talk about IB, but this could easily apply to other programs like SHISM, our Specialist High Skills Major, our Ontario Youth Apprenticeship programs, the iSTEM program over at Aldershot, repertoire music happening in our home schools, ninth credit music, etc. IB is the most complicated of all of them because IB is an additional curriculum on top of the Ontario curriculum. And we find ourselves in the position that other boards that offer this optional program find themselves in, which is that we cannot offer it both in the distance platform and the blended platform. So when we surveyed people, the majority of people wanted this program in their home schools. We have a certification issue for teachers. If you teach IB, you must have a particular IB certification. You cannot teach the program if you are not certified. And so even if we said we would run a very tiny class in the virtual, we wouldn't have the teacher, as an example, if our physics IB teacher from a particular school is teaching the IB at White Oaks, they can't also teach the program over in the virtual school. And while IB sounds like a class, it's not. IB is a variety of classes. There are more than 18 choices that a student can make when they're choosing their courses within the International Baccalaureate grade 11 and 12 program. And so these are just some of the complexities that made it very, very difficult. We recognize that we disappointed some families, and it's just a reality that we find ourselves in at this point. And it applies the same to iSTEM. The iSTEM families had to make that decision to continue in the program or go to the virtual school. We've had to collapse and combine some of our SHISM programming, etc. It's just the reality we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much for that explanation. And as I said, I knew it was beyond IB, that there was many other programs that were affected. So thank you for that. I just wanted to put it out in the public realm. I felt it was important, and I just wanted to have it on record in another format, that so that maybe parents who are listening right now, they would understand that this was not a choice. This was it was something we had no control over because of staffing and those type of things. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So there are no other speakers on the speakers list, and my alarm has gone off for the 30 minutes. So before we sign off, I'd just like to wish all of the students the best academically, and all of our students and staff good physical and mental health as they navigate the new school year in these extraordinary times. Take care, everybody, and good night. We have exhausted our agenda, and I declare this meeting adjourned.